to Naples?
Well, essentially, I came down here in late April of 2020, and then they came down here August 1st.
So from late April of 2020 to August 1st, how much time did you have to spend with your daughter?
Not a lot. I made a few trips up to Jacksonville. Liz made a few trips down to Naples. Not as much as I would have liked to have, but you know, the situation, well, I just started a new job. I came down here to do that. And so I saw Madison every day on the phone. You know, we do FaceTime. And so every day I would talk to Madison and see her. You know, so I was able to see them, and they would, you know, I would go up, they came down.
So after she came down and you became concerned or aware that you were likely heading into a dissolution of marriage, is that when you started keeping a calendar?
Yeah, that's right. Once we started, you know, with the time sharing, and it was clear that this was going to be a divorce situation, then, you know, I started keeping track of days that I would have Madison.
And how is it reflected on your calendar? How do we tell what is a day?
The X's show the days that I had Madison.
And is this an accurate copy of your calendar of time sharing?
Yes.
And up until when?
It goes all the way up to May 4th of 2021.
Your Honor, this time I move for the admission of Exhibit 14.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 14 is admitted.
Have you put together a proposed parenting plan with the assistance of my office?
I did.
Let me direct your attention to Exhibit 19.
Okay.
Can you tell the court what Exhibit 19 is?
This appears to be our parenting plan. But let me check. I believe this is the parenting plan that we have recommended.
And what do you believe from a time-sharing perspective is in the best interest of your daughter as we move forward?
I believe it's in Madison's best interest to share equal time with both her mother and her father.
And does this proposed parenting plan structure the time-sharing in that regard?
It does.
And is it also addressed a shared parenting approach?
It does.
And is this a true and accurate copy of your proposed parenting plan?
It is.
Your Honor, this time I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 19.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 19 is admitted.
How have you well, strike that? Have you developed a support system to assist you with Madison and in those times where you may have conflicts?
I have.
And have you also done that for other reasons for Madison's benefit?
I have.
What were the other reasons?
Well, I just think it's good for Madison to get out, to experience other people, to spend time playing with other children, I just think that it's in her best interest to have those social attachments and experiences, as opposed to being at home and playing at home or just swimming in your own pool at home.
What have you done to achieve that goal?
Well, I did reach out once this separation occurred, and I was having time with Madison every other weekend and during the week. I had reached out to somebody that I'd known for years here in town that had a daughter who was a year older than Madison, and so I reached out to her, and I asked her if she knew of any groups or any people that moms or dads or whatever that kids get together and play, and that's what I did. And she had a group of moms who get together pretty regularly and have their kids play together. So I joined with them. They kind of welcomed us, and now I try to take Madison is every weekend I try to take her if I can with that group, and if that group's not doing something, then I'll just take Madison out. I will go somewhere in the park or whatever.
So when did you start? When did you join this mom's play group?
It was probably, I want to say probably in October of 2020.
And how? I mean, have you gotten over the awkwardness of how many other dads are involved in the mom's play group?
There's really, primarily it's just the moms with their kids. Now there's been birthday parties and stuff where some of the dads were there, but 9 out of 10 times it's a few moms and me, and that's
And how has that worked out for you?
well, that's fine.
Now, with beyond this mom's group, do you have family members that you have involved in providing support for you and Madison through all this?
I do. My parents live here in Naples.
How available are your parents?
Well, they're both retired, so they're available as needed.
What did your dad used to do?
Well, my dad was a police officer, and he had to unfortunately take a medical disability. And then he went to, when we moved to Naples, he became a financial advisor down here. So he did that for a number of years.
And what was your mom's career before she retired?
My mother was a housewife. Although my parents owned, while my dad was a police officer, my parents owned a number of businesses up in Ohio that they had that my mother would work in. So.
And how frequently do you and Madison see your parents?
Well, we see them frequently. At least now, a minimum, we're seeing them once a week. They were staying at my house for a bit once they moved down here. So they were there at the house for a while. And so we saw them every day.
So where were they living before they came back to Naples?
Up in the Jacksonville area.
And do you know why they were in Jacksonville?
They moved there to be closer to Madison and Liz and I.
So when you all were living in Jacksonville, how frequently would you as a family see your parents?
Usually probably on average once a week.
Okay. And why did your parents move from Jacksonville to Naples, as far as you know?
They only moved down here because Liz and I and Madison had planned to move down here. Once we told them that, they said, well, we're gonna go ahead and move down there too, because we want to be close to you guys.
How would you describe the relationship Madison has with your parents?
She loves my parents. It's great. It's a close, loving relationship.
What type of activities does she do with your parents?
My mom will play with her physically more than my dad. But my dad will play with her some too. But one of the things that she liked to do was when my parents would watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, which they did daily, Madison loved to go and watch that as a family. So that's something she enjoyed.
So she's a big Wheel of Jeopardy fan? Or
Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, that's right.
Yeah.
She is now.
And are you aware of any limitations that your parents have that would interfere with their ability to care for or participate with Madison?
None that I'm aware of.
You heard Ms. Hall ask your sister about I believe it was your sister, about your father's hands. Are you aware of any issue with regard to your father's hands?
I'm not aware of any issue per se with my dad's hands. I asked my dad after we'd had a hearing here about, that had come up, and I asked my dad. I said, well, they asked about hands, and I said, do you have something on your hand? He said, no. He said some years back, he'd had some surgery on his wrists, but his wrists are fine. And I didn't even know it. At least if he told me, I didn't remember it.
Does your father have any driving restrictions?
Not to my knowledge.
with regard to your sister testified earlier, how frequently do you, let's strike that. How would you describe the relationship you and Madison have with your sister?
Yeah, it's a great relationship.
Why has that been important from your perspective to Madison?
I think it's really important for Madison as an only child to have these interactions with people outside of just her mother and father. That includes family members, that includes other children, that just includes people that I think that it's important. And Julie is a different figure. She's an aunt. And so Julie brings something. When I have Madison, Julie brings something to the table that I don't have. I'm not that feminine. And so if I've asked Julie, hey, can you help us clothes shop?
Is clothes shopping a challenge for you?
It can be. Julie knows right where to go. She's had 3 kids, one of which was a girl, and so she's skilled at it, and I'm still learning the ropes.
So Julie's much better at being a girl than you are?
To the best of my knowledge.
All right. With regard to Robin and Sydney, why have you reached out to Robin and Sydney for assistance?
Well, Robin and Sydney, they offered, once this occurred, Robin said, hey, we can babysit Madison. I know you have to work, and we would both love to babysit Madison for you. We're happy to do it. Sydney and Madison have just a really great bond, and so I was all for it. I thought, setting aside the whole issue of I have to earn money to provide for my family. Set that aside. I feel like the relationship with Sydney especially is really, really healthy for Madison. She looks up to Sydney. She's an 18-year-old young lady. She's very, Sydney's a good student. She goes to community school. She gets good grades. Sydney would be the primary person to work with Madison on the day she was babysitting her. And, Sydney would make sure homework was done. Sydney would if I cooked some meal or prepared some meal, she would make sure Madison, if she was hungry, then would be fed. If Madison said, hey, I don't want to eat yet, then when I got home, I would feed her. But, that's kind of how it was. Madison was always taken care of very well by both Robin and Sydney. And Madison really enjoys that time with them.
How has Madison been doing in school this past year?
She's doing excellent. The last 2 grade periods, she had straight A's. I think the first grade period, she might have gotten a B in one subject, but I can't ask for really any better.
Take a look at exhibit number 17. Can you tell us what 17 is?
Yes, that's her grade card.
Those are her report cards
That's right.
for the past year?
Yes.
Are these true and accurate copies of her report cards?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I've moved for the admission of exhibit 17.
Any objection to Exhibit 17 being admitted?
No objection.
Exhibit 17 is admitted.
You talked about meals briefly. Explain to the court how you have stepped up with regard to meals and feeding Madison.
Well, obviously, when my wife and I were together, then, Liz primarily cooked, although, there were a number of grill nights, and there were certain things I would make, like homemade pizza. That was the running joke, Daddy makes the best pizza. So, but I have, obviously had to learn how to make more things so I can, feed Madison other foods, other than just the typical kid fare, hot dogs, grilled cheese, etc. I'll make that stuff on occasion for her, but I try to, as much as I can, provide, some kind of meal that's, more traditional, for Madison.
And so how do you handle lunches, for instance?
Well, I make Madison's lunch every night before once she goes to bed, I put Madison down to bed at 8 o'clock. And once Madison's down to bed, I go into the kitchen and I make Madison's lunch. Frequently, I'll ask Madison, "What do you want in your lunchbox tomorrow?" And she'll say, "I want this" or "I want that." Her number one choice is salami. We started doing it with the bread, but it came back with the bread, the salami eaten, but the bread not touched. So we eventually switched to really just the salami. I would just put more salami in. She sometimes asks for pasta. I'll put a little olive oil in pasta. For her, what I do is I buy that hidden veggie pasta. So then she's getting her vegetables, and
So
she doesn't know it. That's
sneak
right.
attack on the vegetables.
That's right. Although she's a good reader, so she may start asking real soon, "What does hidden veggie mean?" But nonetheless, that's what I do. I make her lunches. She has a snack. She has 2 snack periods at school, and then she has lunch. So, the snacks are put in the front of her book bag. The lunch is put in a lunch pail inside the book bag, and so that's what I've been doing. I've really, tried to give her what she wants, because she's a very finicky eater, and both Liz and I both have the same problem. Stuff comes back. She comes back, with her not eating, to the point where at one time I did email the teacher and said, "Hey, Madison's lunch box is coming back, and there's really," and she says she's running out of time, and and I know what these kids do. They'll talk and chit chat with the other kids during lunch, and then she only gets 20 minutes for lunch. The 20 minutes is up and she hasn't eaten. So I did ask the teacher to, I emailed her and said, "Can you try to look out for this and get her on task?" So.
So I'm going to direct your attention back to Exhibit 18. We've put together a series of photographs that are the first stretch here, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but give the court briefly a feel for what's depicted in these pictures.
Sure. Exhibit 1 is a photograph. Page 1. Let's see here. Exhibit 18. Page 1 is Madison and I. That's actually at Robin Schiller's house. I want to say that was Thanksgiving of 2020.
So is page 2, is that the people who attended the Thanksgiving dinner?
That is just my family. That's my nephews, and my nephew's wife, and my parents are on the far left. Obviously, me and Madison, my sister Julie, and my nephew's wife. So that's everybody in there.
When we look at pages 3 and 4, what are those?
That is Madison and I at, I believe that's Fleischman Park, yeah. And we're just there. That's on a day that we were there playing with the play group.
Looking at Exhibit 6, or page 6 of Exhibit 18. What is that one?
That's Madison with her cousins, Hunter and Alex. Those are the boys. And then the baby is baby Elle, and that's Alex, my nephew Alex's daughter.
Okay. Looking at page 11 of Exhibit 18, who's this group?
Yeah, that's a group of the kids that Madison plays with. So that's a number of the kids that she regularly plays with.
Is this from the mom's group?
Yes.
Who's Madison's best friend?
I think that with this group, Sadie is the little girl that she plays the most with. And so that's, if I had to say, any of the kids in the group, that's the one, that's the girl that she plays the most with.
Go to 12, page 12, the pumpkin patch. Who are the kids here?
Yes, that's Sadie's in the pink shirt. And let's see here. The little girl on the far left is that is, I'm trying to remember her name now. And I know it, but I'm trying to remember it.
It's okay.
That's all right. I do.
So you got a whole series here. Are these just Madison with various friends and at various activities? Yeah,
these are the kids that are involved in this group of kids that I, bring Madison to meet up with, to play with. And so these are just photos of different times. One's of her, we went to the Collier County Fair. And so that's kids from the group in Madison playing at the fair. There's another one, we went to the bird rookery sanctuary and walked that. So there's a photo from there. So that's what the photographs are.
With regard to shared parenting and coordination with your wife in the past year since this divorce has started, have you had difficulties with her as far as trying to work through time sharing?
Yeah, there's been a number of difficulties with the time sharing.
Let me direct your attention to composite exhibit 15. Can you tell the court what exhibit 15 is?
Exhibit 15 is a number of emails between Liz and I since the time that we split.
And are these true and accurate copies of the emails between you and Elizabeth?
They are.
Your Honor, this time I'd move for the admission of exhibit 15.
Any objections?
No objection.
Exhibit 15 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you the very first email, which is base stamp 1 of 15, was this when the two of you were trying to work out the initial temporary parenting time?
Yes, it was.
And what was basically the concept as you understood it then?
Well, at that time, we were living in separate locations. Liz was at the condo in her down on Marco, and I was staying at my sister's house. And so I sent Liz this email to work out a schedule to split time between Liz and I for Madison. So that was, I proposed that we alternate weeks beginning on Friday after school, and then, except every Monday and Tuesday, she'll stay with the off-week parent. That way she doesn't go more than 3 days.
Did she object at that point?
No, she did not.
Did there come a point where she started through emails basically micromanaging you?
Yes.
And let's take a look at a few of these. I don't want to read every one of these, but let's do this as quickly and efficiently as possible. Show the court some examples of what you've gone through in the past year in being micromanaged by your wife.
Objection, Your Honor. I haven't objected. I've let a lot of leading questions go, but Mr. Lombardo is adding adjectives and asking leading questions. I just ask going forward so I don't have to keep interrupting.
Okay, if you find a leading question, you have to object to it. I'm not going to do a standing, but it was a little leading. Mr. Lombardo tried to form the questions appropriately.
I'm not aware that adjectives are not permissible in questions.
They may be permissible.
All right, thank you. Again, in the interest of the court's time, let's identify some circumstances where you've had issues with regard to being micromanaged.
Sure. And let me let's see here. So there's one that all right. So if we look at, for instance, pages 3 and 4 of Exhibit 15, and what those are is those are an email from Liz to me. Let's see here, September 16th of 2020, where she kind of emails me and says, well, if we're going to do this 50-50 thing, she says that, she wants to keep her during the school week, and then I would have her on the Fridays. I wasn't agreeable to that, and we never did that. But so she says that for food, I mean, if you look at page number 4, she gives a list of the food to make for her, and it's not that
What accusation does she make about your request for 50%?
Well, she makes the accusation. If you look at page 3, she says, so I would guess that your attorney told you to start 50% custody to benefit you, but I don't feel like this schedule we currently have is in Madison's best interest. And so, she, starts off the email with, essentially saying your attorney told you to do 50%, not you.
Is that true?
No, it's actually not true. I never received any such guidance from anybody, attorney or otherwise. So it's false.
What difficulties did you have with regard to actually picking up your daughter on your days?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 times that Liz had either emailed or texted me and said, you're not, I'm going to pick her up. You're not getting her on this day. I understand it's your day to pick her up, but you're not doing that. So that happened on, I want to say 3 occasions.
Look at Bates stamp 19.
Mm-hmm.
What is she telling you at 19?
Yeah, she is telling me that she's going to keep her all week, and then I can have her every other weekend. And if I get off work early and want Madison to spend the night during the week, we can meet somewhere. And so that was a time where these emails were essentially at a time and went back and forth where she was saying, you're not going to get her on the day that you're supposed to have her.
Look at Bates stamp 26. What was happening there?
All right, so this is November 12th of 2020. Again, Liz is insisting that she's going to pick her up every day after school from that point on. So, because she didn't want Madison being with any babysitter. And so, that was another one of those email exchanges.
Because of her complaints about babysitters and those kinds of things, other people picking her up at school, what did you wind up doing?
Okay, so at first I had it set up where Robin and Sydney would pick Madison up from school, and then I would, leave work at, right around 5:30 to then come home and take over. And because of, Liz's interference and objection to that, I stopped having Robin and Sydney watch Madison. So, we severed that babysitting relationship, and I just started picking Madison up from school. And I was doing that for a while, and, on the days I had her. And then once my parents came down here, they moved down, they stayed at my house while we were waiting to get, while my parents were waiting to buy and close on a house. So when they were there, I would pick Madison up from school, and then I would take Madison to my house. My parents were there, and they would babysit Madison. And again, I would probably leave work at about 5:30 to come home and have dinner with everybody. And that was that routine. And then Liz objected to that and said, not only can non-family members such as Robin and Sydney watch Madison, but you also cannot have your parents watching Madison for those few hours between when Madison gets off school and work. So I then started picking Madison up and staying at the house with Madison and my parents. And now my parents have recently moved out because they bought a house. But that's the situation. That's what I've had to deal with. It's been great.
Look at page 28 of exhibit number 15. What is your wife telling you here?
Yeah, well, this is a the November 17th, 2020. If you see on page 28, this is an email. It's part actually of an email chain that involved my having Madison, and so she's saying, oh, she says Madison cheered when you told her you would be picking her up. She cheered because she loves when you pick her up. All she wants is her parents. But she says, are you changing your jobs? She wants me to share with her, what's going on with that.
Did you share with her the information about the job change?
Yeah, she knew that I changed jobs. She knew that I had started working here, that I didn't hide anything, no reason to.
Go to Bates stamp 41. Is this another incident of her deciding that she was going to change the schedule?
Yeah, that's from December 28th of 2020. So
what's the subject of this email that she sent you?
Keeping Madison for the week.
And what is she telling you here?
She's telling me that she's going to keep her for the rest of the week, despite the fact that it was my time to have her. So I got this email, and that was her saying, no, you're not going to have Madison. So
Take a look at Bates stamp 46. What is she telling you here?
She wants to make a list of what Madison's eating.
So she's asking you to keep lists of what your daughter is eating and exchange it with her?
Yes, and she sent a spreadsheet to do it. And actually, at first I started doing it, and but then I would look at the spreadsheet and it was kind of the same thing over and over again. I just didn't think there was really much value in having a spreadsheet. I was willing to do it and try it and see, what the situation was. But, after doing it for a little bit, I didn't think it added anything to the situation.
Turn to Bates stamp 47. Do you believe, based upon the communications what's your belief based upon the communications you've had with your wife as to whether she recognizes that 50-50 division of time is the likely outcome here?
Well, she had said it to me a number of times, verbally, that she knows that that we're going to have a 50-50 situation once the court rules. She's conceded that. She concedes that on page 47. She says that I know that in May the judge will probably split custody 50%. She goes on in there to, accuse me of suffering from anxiety and depression, which I've never been suffering from or diagnosed with. But
does she continue to make these comments even in as late as March of this year? Look at Bates stamp 54.
Yes.
What does she tell you? What does she tell you on March 1st?
Yeah, March 1st, she says she's never said anything to Madison about my being too busy or being busy. And that's in response to my email where, I tell her to please stop telling Madison that I am too busy to pick her up from school. And I tell Liz, Madison's told me more than once that you've been telling her this, and it's not right. And Liz responds, I've never said anything to Madison about you being busy, which of course we have a text message from Liz that is in the exhibits here.
All right, take a look at Exhibit 16. What are the composite Exhibit 16s?
Composite Exhibit 16 is text messages between Liz and I.
Are these true and accurate copies of the text messages between the two of you?
They are.
In this format, who's in the blue, who's in the gray?
Mr. Lombardo?
Yes.
Pause for a moment.
All right.
Okay, you're on exhibit 16.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Who's in the
Please
blue?
continue.
Gray.
I am in the blue and Liz is in the gray.
And are these true and accurate copies of your text messages between the two of you in the
They
last
are.
several months?
They are.
Your Honor, this time I move for the admission of exhibit 16.
Any objections?
No objection.
Exhibit 16 will be admitted. Who was blue?
Blue is the husband, gray is the wife. Does this contradict her comment in the emails that she's never said you are too busy to pick her up to your daughter?
It does, and if you look at midway down on February 22nd, 2021 at 8:05 a.m.
What's the bait stamp number?
8.
What does it say?
She says, I told M, and that's Madison, I was picking her up for the week. This is from Liz. I told her you were busy with work. She was excited. I will let you know what I think of the therapy place in Fort Myers. Let me know if you have another suggestion. And so, of course, that's really the basis for my having sent her an email saying, stop telling Madison that I'm too busy. That and Madison telling me that, mom is saying this, that you're too busy to pick me up or have me for the day.
All right, now going back to the emails and exhibit 15 and page 54 in particular, what does she tell you that she believes this court system considers?
Yeah.
Website, where are you, Mr. Lombardo?
On page 54, exhibit 15.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look at page 54, exhibit 15, and you go down the third paragraph, she accuses me of offering to do the things that I'm doing with Madison until we get divorced, because I think it will make me, she thinks that I think it will make me look better in court. She says, we both know the judge will give 50%, so it doesn't matter. She goes on to say that Collier County doesn't care about the best interest for the child, so go ahead and pretend to participate now. So, that's what I've been dealing with here.
And let's be clear. What is the reason you want to have time with your daughter?
Because I love my daughter, and I think it is in her best interest to have a solid relationship with both her mother and her father.
And so as we proceed forward, what are you requesting this court to do with regard to the parenting plan for your daughter?
I'm asking that the court, adopt our parenting plan and have my wife and I share 50-50 custody of Madison. That's what I'm asking the court to do. I do think the court, does care about the best interests of children in Collier County. So I'm convinced that the court will do just that.
All right, let's go to the economics of this.
Before we change topic, can we just we're just gonna take a 5-minute break.
That'd be perfect. Thank you. I was gonna.
It's 11:26. We'll be here. We'll be back at like 11:35. Okay. Whenever everybody's back, we are able to proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know I was
11:35.
I know I was pivoting, but I want to go back on one issue. Did you have circumstances where you literally, there were difficulties in exchanges at the school?
We did, yes.
Take a look at Exhibit 15, the emails, page 47. Can you tell briefly what the court, what this is about at this juncture?
Yes, it was Sunday night, February 21st, 2021 at 10 o'clock p.m. Liz had sent me an email essentially saying that, you know, because she had Madison that day, Sunday, and she would be taking Madison to school in the morning, and I was on the schedule to pick Madison up that afternoon. And I received this email where Liz says, no, you're not going to get Madison today. You're not getting her all week. I'm going to pick her up today, and then I'm going to keep her for the entirety of the week. And of course, I objected to that.
And what happened the following day at the school pickup?
Right. And so I, you know, there were some text messages back and forth, but nonetheless, I had told Liz, hey, I saw your email, not happening. I'm picking Madison up. It's my day. And Liz said, no, you're not. And so I went to the school, and it's a car line. And unfortunately, you know, in this emergent circumstances, I cut the car line. You know, in order to get in the very front, I cut the car line. And, you know, at the time I was driving a loaner vehicle because my car was in the shop. So Liz didn't, I think at first, see that it was my car, because it was a different car. And lo and behold, Liz is in the car line right behind me.
Well, let's take a look at the text messages on Exhibit 16, page 9. Is this the exchange on that day?
It is the exchange, 221 at 3 o'clock.
And what happens that day?
Well, then I'm there. I'm in the loaner car from the dealership, and I pull up. You know, because I was first in line, they call Madison to the Cohen number. So I pull up. Liz pulls up behind me, and Madison, you know, I'm waving at her, so she comes to my car. And but she sees, you know, her mom behind her and her, you know, her car. So she's a little confused. She gets in the car. She says, Mom's behind us. And I said, yeah, she is. But, you know, today's my day and I'm picking you up. So, you know, so I started getting these text messages from Liz. She says, I'm behind you. And then she says, well, you got off work at 1 p.m. to pick your daughter up, to give her a babysitter. Wow. Or are you taking off work? How long do you plan on keeping that job? I will be in the car line tomorrow. She goes on to pick up the phone because she starts calling. She probably called me 3 or 4 times while Madison was in my car, but I have my phone set up on Bluetooth for speaker. So, you know, not in a million years was I going to pick up that call for my daughter to hear whatever was going to come up then. So then, you know, Liz, you know, I did eventually talk to Liz. She demanded to come by my house to talk to Madison. So I said, fine, you know, come by. I don't know why you're doing this, but come by. And she came by and saw Madison for a couple minutes and left.
So has either your wife or her family done anything to try to jeopardize your employment since all this happened?
Yes, you know, two things. One, I think that in big part, you know, the objections to the babysitters, to my parents watching her, you know, the comments and some of the text messages, you know, lead you to believe that, from my perspective, that, you know, Liz's objections and obstructions to my having Madison, in large part, were based on trying to make it difficult for me to, you know, keep a job, earn a living, and whatnot. And, you know, it really, to me, seems apparent that was at least part of the strategy. And so that coupled with, you know, I started getting letters from her father, and then he sent one to my employer here, accusing me of stealing money from him, essentially saying that I should be fired. You know, just, you know, anything. He also sent a letter to the bar, complaining about an alleged loan that he says he made to me, which I have no knowledge of. And then he had also sent that letter defaming me up to my former employer at Morgan & Morgan in Fort Myers. So they also received a letter accusing me of a number of things, including criminal activity.
Take a look at Exhibit 29. What is Exhibit 29?
Exhibit 29 are the letters that were sent by my father-in-law.
And are these to your various employers in the Florida bar and your responses?
Yeah, that's right.
Are these true and accurate copies of the letters that have been received?
That's correct.
Your Honor, this time I've moved to the admission of Exhibit 29.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 29 is admitted.
How has that applied pressure on you in the workplace?
Well,
And Your
Yeah.
Honor, to relevancy.
Mr. Lombardo?
Well, the relevance is clear, Your Honor. I mean, one of the issues here is whether she is literally trying to apply pressure on him and create an environment where he loses jobs in order to extract a result in this case.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Go ahead.
okay. So, you know, if you're looking at the this exhibit 29, there's just a number of letters in here. The first one was to Mr. Lombardo here. You know, that he, he complains about the letter that I sent in return to him. To his letters, he, disparages me.
Well, and the letters speak for themselves. What I want to know is, from your perspective, what kind of pressure does that apply to you on you as far as your employment is concerned?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, obviously it's an attempt for him to try to get me to lose my employment. And, obviously this is an awkward thing. It's troublesome, from that perspective. It's, my employer's receiving letters from somebody accusing me of a number of things. I think it's all, again, part of the orchestration to make things difficult for me in this divorce. So I throw my hands in the air and I say, fine, I'm not going to have my daughter 50%, or fine, I'm going to give up any claim to the, monetary claims that are an issue, anything like that. What requests have you made of your employer with regard to your schedule as it relates to Madison? Yes, and I've made a request that that there be flexibility so I can leave work to go pick up Madison and stay with her, so that I, can have my time sharing with her. And so that's what I've had to do. It's not been easy, I think, for anybody, but it's the situation I'm in. All right, now let's change gears for a second. We talked about your background. Briefly tell the court what your wife's educational background and employment background is. Yes, well, Liz has an undergraduate degree in criminal justice, and she has a master's degree in education. And so I know she worked for the Collier County Sheriff's Office for give or take 6 years, I guess, 6-7 years, whatever it was. There, and then she was employed by the Collier County School District for another 10-11 years. We got married not long, probably 3 or 4 months after we got married. She resigned her position as a school teacher with Collier County, and shortly after that we moved to Jacksonville. All right, now, at the time the prenuptial was done, do you recall what assets you had, assets and liabilities? I do. I had, and take a look at Exhibit 4 of the prenuptial agreement. Did you both do a disclosure to the other of your assets and liabilities? We did. Where does that appear on the prenuptial? Attachments. There are attachments to the very end of the prenup. There is attachments.
Take a look at bait stamp 7 of Exhibit 4.
And yeah, and so just to, real quick, if you look at, if I can.
Go ahead.
Exhibit 4, page 1, you'll see financial disclosure in paragraph 2, and it references exhibits 1 and 2 with Elizabeth's assets and liabilities are exhibit 1, and Frank, mine assets are exhibit 2.
Are you sometimes Frank, sometimes Scott?
Yes, I answer to both.
Okay. All right. And so what did Elizabeth disclose as her assets and liabilities just at the time the prenuptial was entered?
Yeah, the prenuptial was entered on November 25th, 2013. And at that time, Elizabeth had disclosed $70,000 in checking and savings accounts. She disclosed that she owned the property at 1053 Fountain Run here in Naples. That's where we were living. And then she indicated that she had no debts.
And with regard to 1053 Fountain Run, do you know how that was titled at the time?
Yes, that house was in Liz's name solely.
And is what ultimately happened to that house?
Liz sold the house.
Okay. And do you know what she received in the way of net proceeds from the sale of that house?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of between 370, 380.
And what did she do with those funds?
The money was, she transferred the money into an account at Chase, a savings account that was in her name.
In her name alone?
Initially.
Did she, in the time frame that this prenuptial was negotiated, did she ever tell you that she had any debt owed to her parents with regard to this home?
No.
All right. With regard to you, what did you disclose that you had at that time?
I disclosed approximately $48,000 in checking and savings and approximately $10,000 in IRA accounts.
All right. Now, as we go forward, take a look at Exhibit 5. Is that your financial affidavit?
Yes.
And is this a true and accurate copy of your financial affidavit?
Yes, it is. Yes.
And is that accurate as of the date it was filed?
I believe so. I believe it is, yeah.
All right. At this time, Your Honor, I move for the admission of Exhibit 5.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Take a look at Exhibit 7.
Yes.
What is Exhibit 7?
Exhibit 7 are tax returns.
For what years?
These are 2017, 2018, and 2019.
Did you file jointly those years?
We did.
Are those true and accurate copies of your returns?
To the best of my knowledge.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 7.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 7 is admitted.
In your tax returns, did you report any income that was derived from your wife or earned by your wife or received by your wife?
Yes.
What income was received by your wife on these returns as far as you know?
She received income from 2 rental properties in that year.
And how were those rental properties titled as far as you're aware now?
Well, one of the rental properties was sold, and the other rental property is titled in her trust name.
What's the name of her trust?
The Elizabeth Kirshner Revocable Trust, I believe.
And what was the first property that was referenced?
The first property is 5,000 Marco Way, Naples, Florida. I think it's Royal Marco Way, but that's the first property.
Is it 5,000 or is it 3,000?
No, it's 5,000.
Okay. And do you know who the tenants were of that residence?
My wife's parents.
Do you know what the status is today of that trust and that property?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, her parents still live there, to the best of my knowledge.
And is that property still owned by the trust?
To the best of my knowledge, it is.
Right, take a look at exhibit number 32. What is exhibit 32?
All right, exhibit 32 is a warranty deed for 3,000 Royal North Way, which is a different property.
All right. Let me withdraw that then. We'll move on. With regard to the other property it was in the trust at the time the returns were filed, where was that property?
That property is that's a condominium on Marco Island.
No, the other property.
Oh, the other property. The other property was a property up in New York State in Old Forge, New York, that was owned in my wife's trust.
And who were the tenants to that property, if you know?
To the best of my knowledge, her parents were the tenants. That whether they rented it out to anybody else, I don't know.
Do you know ultimately what happened to that property?
That property was sold.
What happened to the proceeds to the best of your knowledge of that one?
It's my understanding they did a 1031 exchange for at least part of the proceeds, if not all of them. But they did a 1031 exchange and they purchased a house here in Naples in the trust, my wife's trust.
And do you know who resides at that house today?
My wife does.
With regard to exhibit number 8, or what is exhibit number 8?
Exhibit number 8 is this is a pay statement.
Are these your copies of your pay stubs?
Yes, these are my pay stubs.
Are they true and accurate copies of your pay stubs?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move for the admission of exhibit 8.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 8 is submitted.
Thank you. With regard to exhibit 9A and B, what are these?
These are bank statements from Chase Bank.
Are these your banks?
Yeah, that's correct. This one here is from my account. The beginning one is from my account and my name.
And are all of them from your account and your name?
Yeah, there's just one statement here, I think.
And during the course of your marriage, did you two maintain separate bank accounts?
No, we did not.
How long have you had separate bank accounts?
Just after we split up, at some point in time, because the account we had a single joint checking account during the marriage, and so we had that right when we got married.
Okay.
We established this account, Chase account, joint name. Once we split up, we split that account 50-50.
Okay.
The checking account, and kind of close that out. That way there were no disputes and no questions.
And since the time of separation, the two of you have now maintained separate bank accounts?
Yes.
Right. And are these true and accurate copies of your bank statements?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of exhibit 9.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 9 is submitted.
Do you have retirement accounts?
I do. I have a 401k plan with my former employer, and then I have a regular IRA and a Roth IRA.
How long have you had the IRAs?
The regular IRA I established, I remember, in 2005, and then the Roth, I'm not exactly sure, but probably somewhere around 2010.
And take a look at exhibit 11, subsections A, B, and C. Are these true and accurate copies of the statements for those various retirement accounts?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I move for the admission of exhibit 11.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 11 is admitted.
All right, now going back to your tax returns, have you filed for 2020?
I just did.
And what happened with when you filed?
I received a call from the H&R Block person who I...
Well, and I don't want any hearsay statements.
That's right.
It was
rejected.
All right. Do you know why your return was rejected?
Because Liz had claimed Madison as her dependent and had a household on her return.
So are you going to have to file an amended return now?
I am.
Do you know how much that's going to cost you?
Well, I'm as far as the additional tax bill, or just the cost of having it amended?
The additional tax bill.
Probably in the neighborhood of $4,000.
And then there's an additional cost for having to amend the return?
I believe there will be.
Why did you believe you should have received the deduction for your daughter for 2020?
Well, because if you look at my wife's financial affidavit, she's represented to everybody that she has no income. So if you have no income, why are you filing a tax return? I guess is the first question. And, the second question is, why would you do that if you know that I'm the primary person that's earning money that's going to pay the child support? Then why on earth would you do that? I don't understand it.
Let me ask you this. What are you requesting the court to do with regard to the child deduction in the future?
Well, I'm going to request that the court allot that to myself because I'm the one that is going to be having the child support burden in this case.
And with regard to 2020, what are you requesting the court to do with regard to that return and her election to take your daughter as a deduction?
I'd ask that the court order my wife to amend her tax return and to not file as herself as head of household, and to remove my daughter, claiming for my daughter as her dependent, and allow me to do that for financial reasons, obviously.
With regard to other financial issues in this case, what other assets exist that you believe are marital and subject to distribution in accordance with the prenuptial agreement?
There's a car.
What's the car and who's?
It's a 2016 Acura. I think it's an RDX.
All right, take a look at Exhibit 26. What is Exhibit 26?
Yeah, that's right. That's the vehicle registration from the Acura.
And is this a true and accurate copy of the vehicle registration?
Yes.
And how was the car titled as far as you knew?
As far as I knew, it was in both my name and Elizabeth's name.
At this time, I move for the admission of Exhibit 26.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 26 is admitted.
Do you know whether the car is still titled in joint names?
The car is not titled in joint name.
Do you know when that changed?
April 6th of 2021.
How did the title change?
It's now just titled in my wife's name.
Did you participate in that decision?
I did not.
Were you aware of that change?
I was not.
Did you do research into what the value of that vehicle is?
I did.
And let's take a look at Exhibit 27. What is 27?
This is the Kelly Blue Book printout.
And what do you believe, based upon your research, that vehicle is worth?
$20,045.
Is there any debt on that vehicle?
Not to my knowledge.
Your Honor, this time, by the way, is this a true and accurate copy of the Kelly Blue Book on the car?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time I move for the admission of Exhibit 27.
Any objection, Exhibit 27?
No objection.
Exhibit 27 is admitted.
Do you have a vehicle?
I do.
What is your vehicle?
I have a 2016 Ford Explorer.
How is that titled?
In just my name.
And has it always been in just your name?
Yes.
Take a look at Exhibit 28. What is 28?
That's the title for my vehicle.
Is it a true and accurate copy of the registration?
Yes, it is.
This time, Your Honor, move for the admission of Exhibit 28.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 28 is admitted.
Have the two of you divvied up the furniture and furnishings from the house in Jacksonville?
We did divvy up the furniture and furnishings.
How were those items paid?
Some of them were paid through, they were paid from our joint account. Those items, the furniture were paid mostly, I think, through Liz and I's joint checking account. But I think I made a $10,000 payment to District Design.
We'll take a look at Exhibit 31.
31, okay. I made a $10,000 payment to District Design.
Was that for furniture for the house in Jacksonville?
Yes.
And what does Exhibit 31 show us?
All right, well, if you go to page 12, and this is practically illegible, but what this is my check register. This, and unfortunately it didn't come out very clearly, but it's, I wrote a $10,000 check to District Design for the amount of $10,000 towards, and that was written on November 2nd of 2015.
Did that come from your premarital money?
That did.
But how do you believe that is characterized now after you made that payment? Marital or non-marital?
After I made the payment, it's marital.
And are these a true and accurate collection of the receipts for the furniture, the purchase of the furniture that went into the house in Jacksonville?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge, they are.
Your Honor, this time I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 31.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 31 is admitted.
Now, the house in Jacksonville, explain to the court the process the two of you went through to identify a house in Jacksonville.
Well, we were renting a house in Jacksonville, and
How long did you rent?
a little over a year.
And at the end, how did you decide on a house to buy?
I let my wife really take the lead on that, as far as looking, because one, she had more time to look, and two, between the two of us, it's just, she's more, picky and knows what she wants and whatnot on a house. So I let her kind of take the lead on that.
When did you finally come down to a choice of a couple of houses?
We did.
What was the difference between the two of you as far as the choices go?
Well, as far as price points, I was hoping to stay in a price point that was around 400,000.
Why was that important to you?
Well, I wanted to keep, our monthly payment lower. I wanted to keep our tax bill lower. Typically the less expensive house is smaller, so it's less to heat it, it's less to cool it, less to maintain and upkeep it. So, a big part of it was just, there's three of us, it's time we had a dog, so I guess four, but three of us. And, and so I didn't think that we needed, more than at the most 3,000 square foot.
What was your wife's desire as far as you understood it at the time?
She wanted something more expensive. She, something bigger. And so she, that was her desire.
And what was the price point that she was looking at?
Well, 500,000 and up.
Ultimately, the house that you purchased, how much did it cost?
I want to say 583,000.
How was that funded?
That was funded in part by money that from my wife had sold her house, right?
Okay.
In Naples. So we used part of that money for the down payment, as well as when we closed on the house. I want to say there was 182,000, give or take, that got transferred from my wife's account over by wire transfer, for the house. The rest of it was taken out in a mortgage.
Okay.
Mortgage.
Who were the guarantors on the mortgage?
Myself and Liz.
How was the house titled?
In joint tenants.
Who was earning an income in the years that the mortgage was paid, the insurance and the real estate taxes?
I was.
And what was the source of the payments for those mortgage payments, insurance, real estate taxes?
From my income.
At the time of this transaction, what discussions did you and your wife have with regard to the status of the funds she put into that house?
We really didn't have any discussions about the status. I mean, it was really never discussed, other than, we're going to use the money from the sale of my house in part to fund the purchase of a house in Jacksonville.
My house being her house.
Her house. Her house in Naples.
Yes.
That she owned outright, that she indicated in the prenup she had no debt on, that house. she had, sold that house, and she had said, let's go ahead and take that money to use towards the purchase of the house in Naples.
What did you understand that transaction to be as far as it related to you?
As far as it related to me, I mean, I understood it to be, if you want to call it a gift, that's what it would be, is gifting from my wife to me during the marriage. I probably viewed it more as her contribution, because I would be working to pay the mortgage, correct? And she would, she put this money in. The plan was for her to be a stay-at-home mom. So she put this part in to purchase the house. I would work, I would pay the mortgage, I would pay the taxes, I would pay the insurance, I would pay the, the electric bill, so, that was kind of the deal.
What discussions, if any, did you have with her parents about the use of the money from the sale of the Fountain Run house?
I didn't discuss with them the money from the sale of the Fountain Run house.
What has happened let me back up. During the entire time you lived in Jacksonville, up till the time it sold, did you or anyone suggest to you that the money that your wife put in that house was a loan?
No, that was never discussed, never suggested. No, it was never a loan.
Was there any correspondence or any written document to document a loan?
No.
When was the first time you heard that your wife considered this to be a loan?
The first time I heard the word loan spoken by my wife was well after we'd filed for this divorce, during the period of time where we were still talking on the phone. We really after a while, I started limiting my communications via text and email. But at the time, first couple months of the separation, so first 2 or 3 months, it was, we would have phone conversations. And at one point in time, she said, well, that was a loan from my parents. And I said, this is the first time I've ever heard that was a loan from your parents. That's the first time.
At the time of the sale, what was the demand of your wife with regard to what would happen to the net proceeds from the sale of the house in Jacksonville?
My wife, when we were getting ready to sell the house in Jacksonville, she wanted to have the funds transferred, the leftover funds from the sale transferred over into our joint checking account.
And were those funds transferred into the joint checking account ultimately?
They were not.
Did she put any stipulations on what she wanted to do with those funds once they went into your joint checking account?
She didn't say anything about what she wanted to do.
Ultimately,
I'm sorry, Ms. Lombardo, back up. Were the funds transferred to the joint checking account? I missed his answer.
No, sorry, Your Honor. They were not transferred to the joint checking account.
Okay.
What happened to the net proceeds from the sale of the house?
At the time that we closed, they were half the money went out in a check titled to my wife. So 50% of the funds from the sale of the house went to her and a check titled to her. 50% of the funds went to me and a check titled to me.
And have you been using those funds ever since?
Yes.
After the closing, did there come a time where your wife made a demand on you with regard to where you were going to be residing in Naples?
Yes, there was
what was the demand?
Well, she had said that that her parents were going to buy with her a house on a 1031 exchange. They were going to help her find a house in her trust on a 1031 exchange. And what she wanted to do was she wanted to take the money from the sale of our house and she wanted to put that money into a house that would be purchased in her trust, join that money together and then buy a house in the trust name.
Was there any discussion with how you would get any credit at all for what funds she was asking you to contribute into an asset to be acquired by the trust?
Well, there was a discussion in that, this actually, that request about the house and the 1031 exchange actually happened before we closed on the house.
Okay.
Okay. So, and because of the scenario and what was going on at the time, you know, I had gotten very uncomfortable about what my wife's intentions were after we closed on the house in Jacksonville. So my wife and I opened up a joint account here at Wells Fargo Investment Advisors here in Naples before we closed on the house in Jacksonville. And it was a tenants in the entirety account that was set up, and tenants in the entirety in both of our names. And in that way, the money could not be taken out of that account unless both of us signed off on it, either on a wire transfer or a check. So that account was established based on the fact that I had, you know, concerns about what my wife's intentions were once that money hit our joint checking. So I had told Liz, again, before the house sale closed, I told Liz, listen, I'm not willing to have the house close and the funds transferred to our joint checking account. I want to have it transferred over to the joint investment account that we established at Wells Fargo. She said no to that. Absolutely not. She wanted them to go to the joint checking. And I said, look, I'm not comfortable closing on this house with that money going into the joint checking account. Because by this time I thought, you know, there may be an exit plan here on her part. And so I said, well, the other option is we have three options here. We can put it in the Wells Fargo joint account. We can ask the title company to establish an escrow account in both of our names. And when the house sale in Jacksonville closes, that money can go into the escrow account until we sort out the division of this money. Or if it's your preference, we can ask the title company to split the money 50-50, check to you and a check to me, and we can do it that way. But those are the only three ways that I'm willing to close on this house and have that money transferred.
What did she tell you she wanted to do?
She chose to have separate checks, 50% of the amount cut to each.
When she moved down here, did she move into the house you had?
She did not.
Did she move in? Where did she move?
She moved to the house in her trust. It's a condo that's in her trust out on Marco Island, 5,000 Royal Marco.
Did she ultimately, or did the trust ultimately purchase a house for her?
Yes, a house was purchased in the trust.
Take a look at Exhibit 22. What is Exhibit 22?
Yeah, this appears to be the warranty deed for, let's see here, the house that was purchased in the trust recently.
And where is this house located?
Here in Naples, it's in Old Cyprus on Lantana, I believe, Lantana Circle.
And is this a true and accurate copy of the warranty deed that appears at base stamps 1 and 2?
Yes.
And then the property appraiser property summary at base stamp 3?
Yes.
And then the images that appear from base stamps 4 through 28, what do these depict?
These are photographs of the house that was purchased in my wife's trust.
And to the best of your knowledge, are these true and accurate depictions of the residence?
To the best of my knowledge.
Your Honor, this time I move to the admission of Exhibit 22.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 22 is admitted.
Were you ever given the opportunity to move into that residence?
No, I was not given the opportunity to move into that residence.
As we sit here today, how do you consider the funds that were derived from your the sale of the house in Jacksonville?
Well, I consider that was marital property. The house in Jacksonville was marital property. So when the house was sold, the funds, and this is pursuant to the prenuptial agreement, which the prenuptial agreement says that how the asset is titled is how it controls its distribution upon a divorce. And the distribution would be in a 50%, 50-50 distribution. So I consider that to be a marital asset that was sold and 50-50 divided pursuant to the prenuptial agreement.
And with regard to this situation, with regard to the alleged loan, have you ever acknowledged or agreed that there was a loan owed to either your wife's trust, or your wife's parents together, or individually?
No.
And when did what did your mother-in-law do recently in that regard?
She filed suit against both myself and my wife here in Collier County for the money that was allegedly loaned for the house in Jacksonville.
How much is she suing you for?
$250,000.
And have you had to retain attorneys now to defend that?
I have.
Give me one moment, Your Honor. Your wife raised an issue with regard to guns. How many guns, and if I can see the wife's exhibits real quick. Do you both own guns?
We do.
If you look at the wife's exhibit number 7, you see a listing of guns.
Yeah, I see that.
Do you see the guns that are listed under your wife's name?
Yes.
Are any of those 4 guns that were hers prior to the marriage?
2 of them were hers prior to the marriage.
Which ones?
The 2 6-hour firearms.
The 6-hour ones?
That's right.
And then with regard to the Glock 19 and the M&P Shield 9mm, when were those purchased?
During the marriage.
And do you know what the value, or what do you believe what do you believe the value is of the Glock 19?
Probably $300, maybe $350.
With regard to the M&P Shield 9mm, what do you believe the value is?
Maybe that one, maybe $175.
All right. With regard to the guns listed under your name, which I note are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are any of those guns that you owned prior to the marriage?
Yes.
Which ones?
All right, so there's a Taurus 38 Special that I owned prior to the marriage. The Python 357 prior to the marriage. The M&P Smith & Wesson, I purchased that while we were together. The Glock 40 was mine before the marriage. Smith & Wesson 38 Airweight was mine before the marriage, and the 22 Magnum was mine before the marriage. And then when you go down to the long
wait, before we go there, with regard to the M&P Smith & Wesson, what do you think the fair market value is of that today?
Probably 200, maybe 250 somewhere. It's hard to tell, but probably that.
All right, now we have this comment, long guns. You see that, the 6 guns, or whatever it is, I think it's actually 7 guns. Are any of those guns your wife's long guns?
No.
Are any of these guns or long guns weapons that you own prior to the marriage?
Everything on there I owned prior to the marriage. Although I will say that, there's probably an accuracy issue on the 2 old collectors and the Remington, the Winchester. But I would say that the only one on there that is new is I have a Savage rifle. That's a scoped rifle. I bought that while we were together, and I probably paid $400 for it.
And what do you think it's worth today?
Used, probably $275.
You made a comment about inaccuracy. What's the inaccuracy?
Well, she's got 2 old collector's rifles and a Winchester rifle. You know, there's 2 older rifles that are in my safe, and really those are my dad's. I keep them in my safe. You know, I've held on to them for years, but those have always been my dad. We've always considered those my dad's guns. They were his.
So with regard to the distribution of these various assets, do you believe that if your wife kept what she has and you kept what you have, it would be virtually an even division?
It's a wash.
One more second, Your Honor. We've also prepared an equitable distribution worksheet, have we not? Which appears as Exhibit 13. You recognize Exhibit 13?
Yes, yes.
What is Exhibit 13?
This is an equitable distribution worksheet that was prepared.
And is that what you're requesting the court to do from the standpoint of handling the distribution of the properties here?
Yeah, that's right.
And from your perspective, does that wind up in an equalizer being owed from your wife to you? Look at page 8 of Exhibit 13.
Sure. Let me look at this. Yes, there is an equalizer. It looks like it'd be $24,050.
Do you believe, given your understanding of the prenuptial, that this is consistent with the provisions of the prenuptial?
I do.
Your Honor, it's time I move for the admission of Exhibit 13.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 13 is admitted.
Give me one more second, Your Honor. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Hall, the time is 12:20. My thought is that we probably take a break now and return at about 1:30. I have a hearing at 1 I need to do. So that would give me time to do that hearing as well. Although if you think you would want to press forward right now, we could continue up to 1.
No, Your Honor, but what I would like to know is if Mr. Lombardo has any other witnesses.
That's a good point.
I have one more witness. It's a short witness. It won't take much time.
Okay.
Okay, so, that's almost half the time has been used up and we're not finished the case in chief yet. So I'm a little bit worried about that.
I noticed.
The next witness will be less than 15 minutes.
Okay.
I would
do you have any estimate on how long you expect to go on cross-examination, Ms. Hall? I'm not going to hold you to it. I just look for time frame.
I think I'll be surprised if I'm more than 30 minutes. I think I've got it concisely figured out, but I do have 2 very short witnesses I'd asked to take out a turn. I presumed I'd have the afternoon or most of the afternoon, and I'd like to take them right after lunch if possible, back to back.
All right, why don't we just go through cross now then of Mr. Pauser and see if we can complete that, because then that might open up the afternoon. I have a 1 o'clock that I need to go to. Give me 2 minutes to grab a power bar. It's 12:24. Let's be back in 3 minutes.
Fair enough. Hey, Cynthia,
Yes?
I'm just looking at this and I realize, do you have an objection with when you, I don't want to call your client in my case if I don't have to, because what I'd like to get in is the lease and the deed to their parents' house, which is my exhibit 21 and 23.
Why are you putting in the deed to her parents' house?
Because it's in her trust. I don't know that I need that
Why do you
one.
keep calling it her trust?
What's that?
It's why do you keep calling it her trust?
Because it's her trust.
It's not her trust.
Okay,
No.
whatever. 21 is the one I want to get in.
I can hear you all, just so you know.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Judge. I have no objection to 21, and I don't have an objection to, you can put in 24. I don't think it's relevant, but you can put it in.
And what about 25?
Um, 25. I don't think I do. Let me just look. No objection to that, 25.
All right, so we're going to stipulate to that?
Yep.
Okay.
I think this is.
Right. Judge can.
Okay. Let me know when you're all ready.
We're ready.
All right. Please proceed, Ms. Hall.
Well, if I can, during the break, Ms. Hall and I stipulated that my exhibits 21, 24, and 25 would be admitted.
Is that true, Ms. Hall?
Yes, Your Honor.
21,
24, and 25.
24, and 25. The court will admit those. All right.
Your Honor. Thank you.
Please
Good
proceed.
afternoon, Mr. Pauser. I want to move through some of these questions pretty quickly. The prenuptial agreement, which is already in evidence as exhibit number 4. Have you reviewed that thoroughly?
Yes.
Do you agree with me that nowhere within the body of that agreement is there a waiver by your wife to your income during the marriage?
No,
What was the question, Ms. Hall?
There's no waiver of income of either one of you actually in this prenuptial agreement.
No, I mean, I would disagree with that. I would disagree that there's not a waiver of a claim to each other's income.
Where do you find a waiver of each other's income within that agreement?
Sure. So if you look under husband separate property in number 5, what you'll see is that that addresses husband separate property. It starts out addressing the property that I owned at the time that I entered into the prenuptial agreement. If you go on, it says that she's not going to acquire any ownership interest in that as a result of the marriage. I reserve the right to make gifts to her of that separate property, but it doesn't change the agreement. And then it says that either party may either give, inherit, or otherwise receive during the marriage. This is if you look at page 1, it's paragraph 5 of the actual document. The parties further recognize that each brought certain property and assets into the marriage, and that during the marriage, either party may be given, inherit, or otherwise receive from family or sources outside the marriage additional assets, property, or funds. These shall be solely the property of the recipient, free from any claim of the other at any time. So if you're saying that the word waiver has to be in there as kind of a magic word, I would disagree. I believe that my understanding of that provision at the time that I signed this agreement was that.
Objection, Your Honor, I'm going to interrupt here. It goes beyond the scope of the question.
Sustained.
Mr. Pauser, will you agree with me on this point that there is no paragraph labeled parties' income?
I disagree that I would agree that there is no paragraph with such heading.
Thank you. Will you agree with me that nowhere within the body of the prenuptial agreement, exhibit number 4, is there a reference to retirement accounts? Other than your exhibit B.
I would agree that the word retirement account, the words retirement accounts are not in this document.
Okay, and in fact, I misspoke there. If you look at Bates stamp page 8 of exhibit 4, which is your financial disclosure, you list $10,000 in IRA accounts, correct?
That's right.
And is it your testimony that you owned both of those 2 retirement accounts that are currently on your financial affidavit when you signed this prenuptial agreement?
Yes, that's my testimony.
Okay. All right. With regard to your 401k, that was started after the date of marriage, correct?
The Sawfield Shad 401k was started after we were married.
Okay. And that is your only 401k, correct?
That's right.
You don't have one with your current firm, is that correct?
I just started one. I want to say the last pay period was the first time that I was able to contribute.
Okay, and who is the beneficiary of your 401k from your old employer?
I think it's my daughter now.
Well, how did you change the beneficiary of a 401k without the consent of your wife?
I logged on. I'm pretty sure that I logged on, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm pretty sure that after we had separated at some point in time, I logged on to my 401k, if I'm remembering right, and I think I did. I think I logged on and changed online the beneficiaries, if I'm remembering right.
Well, sir, you did. So your testimony is after this divorce commenced, you went in and changed the beneficiary of your 401k?
I think I did, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Well, you understand the standing order, correct?
I do.
Okay, and you in fact filed a motion for contempt against your wife with regard to the car title, right?
Right.
All right, do you have any documentation to show you changed the beneficiary of that 401k?
Again, I don't have any documentation. I think I did. I'm not 100% sure that I did. But for some reason, I thought I changed it, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Up to the date of the divorce being filed, your wife was the sole beneficiary of your 401k, correct?
No, my daughter, I think, was also a beneficiary.
What forms did your wife ever sign waiving an interest in your 401k?
You know, I don't know if she signed anything. I signed up for that 401k plan 6-7 years ago, whatever it was. So I don't recall.
You agree with me, do you not, that it's a federally protected plan under ERISA?
I'm not sure if that plan qualifies under ERISA or not. I can't tell you. It might not.
All right. Would you be fair to say that Mrs. Pauser has never consented to you naming anyone other than herself as the beneficiary of that plan?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever discussed the beneficiaries to that plan with her. So
during the course of your marriage until the divorce was filed or imminent, am I correct that all of your income went into a joint account with your wife?
Did all my income go into a joint account with my wife? No.
Your employment income didn't go into your joint account?
Some of it did.
Didn't you have your checks direct deposited into your bank accounts?
I did after the 401k money was taken out. So I earned money. Part of that money was pre-tax deducted. And then and those deductions would be deposited to the 401k plan. And then the rest of the money would then be deposited into a joint checking account for both Liz and I.
Okay, so I want to, I think we're parsing words here a little bit, so I want to make sure the record's clear. While you were employed, any income that came to you during the marriage went into your joint bank account unless it was put into your 401k, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
And likewise, when Ms. Pauser was employed during the early months of the marriage, her income went into the joint account.
Her W-2 income did go into the joint account.
Yeah, a few times during your testimony, you referred to your wife's trust. What trust are you referring to?
There's a trust entitled the Elizabeth Kirshner Revocable Trust. I know her parents are the trustees, but that during the marriage, that was referred to as Liz's trust.
Referred to as Liz's trust by whom?
My wife or her parents.
Isn't it true that her brother Michael was a beneficiary of that trust for most of your marriage?
I have no clue. She's refused to give us the trust in discovery here, so you may have it. And I've requested it from in discovery in this case, but I have not received it. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question. If you want to fax it to us or email it to me now, I'll be happy to look at it.
You are aware that it was a grantor trust established by her parents, correct?
Again, I requested the trust in discovery. Apparently you have it.
Mr. Polzer, if you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know.
I don't know. Thank you.
Your wife did not establish a trust for herself. Is that a fair statement?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now you filed 3 financial affidavits in this action, is that correct?
I think yes.
Your Exhibit 5, do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
I believe they're in reverse chronological order. So if you could turn to Exhibit 5, date stamp page 22.
Okay.
And then turn to the asset portion, date stamp 28.
I'm sorry, which page 28?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and looking at this page 28, this I'll represent to you. You can look at the last page. It shows that this is your first financial affidavit dated in November of 2020. But on this asset liability schedule, what amount of money did you have in your 401k?
All right, and we're looking at page 29, is that right?
Well, the assets, yeah, start on 28 and go to 29.
All right, so there's a TD Ameritrade IRA 2005 with $16,958.70. And then there's a TD Ameritrade IRA, that's a Roth IRA 6854 with a balance of $9,420.38.
I asked you for the balance of the 401k.
Oh, I'm sorry. $114,992.95.
Okay. And in this financial affidavit, if you could go back to page 28, what is this car that you've listed?
It's my Ford Explorer.
You do not list your wife's vehicle, is that correct?
I didn't.
Okay. And on back to page 28 under jewelry, tag watch, your wife gave you a watch during the marriage, correct? A tag watch?
Yes.
It says here ×2. Is that the value of both watches there?
I have two watches, so that is a combined value.
Okay, and what is the value of the marital watch?
I would estimate $600.
Okay. You've listed on your asset and liability schedule your wife's jewelry. Did you purchase any jewelry for your wife during the marriage?
You know, I purchased one or two things for her, and the particular, I think there was either earrings, perhaps a necklace.
And what would the value be on those items, fair market value?
I really don't know what the fair market value of those items are. Let me see
Okay.
here. If I put something down, I probably just guesstimated.
Okay. You're seeking here, well, your wife's car. That you testified that was titled in the joint names of you and your wife, correct?
I did.
Is that a car that your wife drove since it was purchased?
Yes,
And when you purchased that car, was there a car loan?
there was.
And did there come a time when that car loan was paid off?
Yes.
Where did that money come from?
It was paid from our joint checking account.
Isn't it correct that your in-laws gifted your wife $30,000 and she paid off her car?
There was a gift from my in-laws to us. Yes, and it was deposited to our joint checking account, and then that was used to pay off that car.
Okay, and that was, when was that approximately?
Gosh, maybe 2017 sometime. I really don't particularly remember.
Okay. When this divorce action was filed, you divided up the joint bank accounts, correct?
We did.
Well, you actually divided them, correct?
Well, I divided them with this understanding from my wife. We had talked about it on the phone when we were still talking on the phone, and we had both said we're going to need to split up the checking account. That was not tenable for us to be paying each of us paying our bills off of a joint checking account. That just wasn't going to work. So we split it 50-50, which was consistent with the prenuptial agreement.
Did you also cancel the credit cards?
I think the debit cards got canceled probably for that account number.
I asked about credit cards, sir.
I don't remember canceling any credit cards.
Okay. You were separated in August. You said actually August 1st, 2020 in your testimony, correct?
That's right.
Did you pay any support to your wife or on behalf of your daughter when you first separated?
Not when we first separated. When we first separated, my wife had access to that joint checking account.
So I'm going to rephrase the question. I really want to move this along because I gave the judge an estimate of 30 minutes.
Yes.
So let's ask it this way. After the joint accounts were divided, did you pay any support to your wife for herself or on behalf of your child?
Yes.
Okay. When did you start paying support?
I don't remember the exact date, but I know that we did the calculation at some point in time, probably at the first mediation. I think we did the calculation and calculated what the child support amount would be for Madison.
I'm going to interrupt you because I think I can help you here. Could you turn to your Exhibit 33, not yet in evidence?
I don't have a 33.
I don't have a 33 either.
You're doing what you sent over to me.
I have a letter dated February 1st, 2021. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes. It's listed, it has a date stamp of Exhibit 33 on it, and I put it in my book as Exhibit 33.
That's weird. It's not in ours.
Yeah, no, I've got it right here.
Okay, so does this refresh your recollection when you first started paying support to your wife?
Yes.
Okay, so am I correct that the first time you gave her any support was by a check dated February 1st, 2021, but that you said that check covered the months of October, December, January, and February?
Well, where is that in there? Let's see here.
Second paragraph.
Skipped over November. So in October, November, December, January, and February are the months that this check was to cover.
Okay, and this was you and your attorneys calculated child support, and that's to reflect your child support payment, correct?
Correct.
All right, and pursuant to your calculations, you at that time imputed income to your wife?
We did.
Okay, and there's a worksheet there, so we can just look at that, correct?
Correct.
I know it's unorthodox, but Mr. Lombardo, do you have any objection to putting this exhibit in?
Can I take a quick look at it since I don't have a problem with that.
I mean, I don't have it, so I don't know how you want to do
We'll
that.
arrange to get it to the clerk and to you, Your Honor. We'll do it right now.
Okay.
But I don't understand what happened there.
Okay.
We've had a few trials in the last couple of weeks, so there may be some confusion.
All right, Mr. Pauser, when you became engaged to your wife, is that correct, that you moved into her home in Naples?
Yes, I believe I was already living there when we got engaged.
Okay, all right, and you lived there for approximately a year, is that correct?
Lived where?
In that house that I just referenced.
The Fountain Run house in Naples?
Correct.
I don't think we were there for, I don't think I was there for a full year. I could be wrong.
Okay. When the house was sold, what did your wife do with the proceeds?
She had put the money in a Chase savings account.
And whose name is that Chase savings account in?
Initially, it was just in my wife's name.
And am I correct that within a month or less, her mother's name was added to the account?
I knew that her mother's name was added on the account where it then said Elizabeth or her mother on the account. Yes, at some point in time afterwards.
And you already testified that some of the down payment for the Jacksonville house came out of these funds, correct?
Yeah, those funds from the sale of her house in Naples we had discussed it. We were going to use part of those funds for the purchase of the house in Jacksonville. So the money was transferred from my wife's savings account over into our joint account at Chase. And then the money from the joint account was then utilized to make a down payment on the house.
Okay, so my question was pretty limited there, but I'm going to go back over some of the events there. The money was actually in an account with Elizabeth Hauser and her mother, Linda Kirshner, when it was transferred to the joint account, correct?
The money was in an account entitled Elizabeth Kirshner or Linda Kirshner.
Okay, and initially there was a down payment on the house came out of that account, correct?
The down payment came out of our joint checking account. We wrote a check out of the joint checking account.
Okay, but before it came out of the joint checking account, it was an account with your wife and her mother, correct?
Well, I mean, there was money in there. I mean, it was commingled. We didn't have a zero balance in the joint tenant account. So, you know, money came from my wife's savings account into our joint checking. It was commingled there. And then a check was written for the down payment.
Okay, now the amount that came from your wife's account with her mother was not the full amount of the proceeds of the sale of Fountain Road house, correct?
Correct.
What happened to those proceeds? The balance?
I'm not sure what happened to them. I know that they were transferred out of my wife's Chase savings account, and where they went, I do not know.
Well, we provided you with a tracing of it. Did you look at the tracing?
I don't know if I saw, I don't think I looked at something that showed where, like an account where that money went.
Okay, I'll ask your wife those questions. Now, at the time you purchased the Jacksonville house, would you consider yourself happily married?
Yes.
Okay, and am I correct that your in-laws came over and looked at the house that you were going to purchase before you purchased it?
I think they saw it before we purchased it. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Weren't your in-laws concerned about your ability to purchase a large enough house for your family?
Not to my knowledge. I never had that discussion with my in-laws.
Did your wife, prior to the sale of the Fountain house here in Naples, have $250,000 to put into a new house?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
I'm going to withdraw the question. Have you and your wife divided up all of the marital furniture and furnishings?
I believe we have.
And has it been to your satisfaction, or are you looking for any of the items back?
You know, I was disappointed to a degree with the division because there were a couple chairs that we had initially agreed upon that I was going to get, and then when the property was divided, you know, I wasn't there. I had taken Madison from the warehouse, and so those chairs ended up going to Liz's house. I was dissatisfied with that, but as far as I'm concerned, you know, in looking at the different division, you know, I think that at this point in time, it's probably a wash.
Okay, but your equitable distribution schedule has it not a wash, is that correct?
It may not.
But you believe it's a wash, correct?
I'd say it probably is. And I'd have to look at the equitable distribution.
Exhibit 13.
Okay.
Well, Exhibit 13,
I have to look at Exhibit 13 and see how much money is there. I do believe that my wife ended up with more value of furniture than I did, but you know,
well, you listed on your equitable distribution schedule that your wife received $40,000. So all of the furniture she listed on her financial affidavit, you put on here, all the marital. And then on the next page, you have home furnishings that you only received $5,000.
what page are we looking at now?
It's Exhibit 13, and it would be the third page in. At the very bottom has the amount for your wife, and then at the top of the next page has the amount for you.
All right, so it looks like the 40,000 was, there's a note that says pursuant to wife's financial affidavit. And then I had estimated 5,000 on mine. So yeah, there's a disparity there, of course, in what we in what we had taken, and I believe there is a disparity in what we've taken. But
well, Mr. Pauser, your wife's financial affidavit listed all of the marital furnishing and furnishings at $40,000. She didn't get all of the furniture and furnishings, correct?
no, she didn't get all of them.
Okay, so please turn to the wife's exhibit number 6.
Ms. Hall, what number is this?
It's wife's exhibit 6, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Are you there, Mr. Pauser?
Yes.
Okay, did you receive the items that are listed beside your name?
In part, not all of it.
What didn't you get?
Well, there's lanai furniture from Costco that she took half and I took half.
Your wife doesn't have the other half of the lanai furniture. Do you know where it is?
I have no clue where the
Okay.
other parts of that are.
Is that your only issue with the items listed there?
That's it.
Okay.
I mean, as far as with me, with what I received,
Correct.
okay. As far as with what I received, no. I mean, I don't agree with the dollar amounts assigned to this, but as far as the items, these are things that I received.
All right, the items listed under Liz, did she receive those items?
She received these items and more.
Okay. Do you have any schedules to demonstrate the values that you put on your equitable distribution schedule?
I do not have any schedule to demonstrate the values.
But you did say you believe it's pretty well a wash, correct?
I would say it's probably a wash. I think that there's, again, looking at your client's amended 6, I will say that there are a number of things on there that she has that aren't accounted for here. I think the numbers are on both sides are skewed. So if you go off of this, I don't think this is accurate. Number 6, for instance, there is a Tempur-Pedic king size bed that we purchased with marital funds that Liz has kept. My daughter's queen size bed purchased with marital funds that have been kept. There's a large amount of toys that were purchased for our daughter. And if you don't know this, in this day and age, toys are really expensive. And I'd say Liz probably kept 75%, 80% of the toys. I got probably 20%. So that's another thing that's not on there.
Madison's furniture was purchased by your in-laws, correct?
That I don't know. I think that no. That bed, the bed that Madison sleeps on now at Liz's house was purchased by Liz and I on Costco.com. I'm certain of it.
Mr. Pauser, I'm going to move
Ms.
on.
Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Hall, I don't mean to mess up the flow, but how long do you expect to have, just because I have another hearing? If it's only a couple minutes, we'll continue. If it's more, then.
Yeah, I suggest we break, Your Honor. I'm sorry, it's moving.
Okay. All right. Let's break and we'll come back. Is 1:45 too soon for you all, or?
What time is it right now?
Your Honor, I've got a witness with a time crunch, so we'd appreciate 1:45.
Okay. 1:45 it is. I'll see you then.
Back on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back.
Afternoon, Your Honor.
Afternoon.
Are we ready to pick up where we left off?
Your Honor, I'd like to call out of turn. She should be in the waiting room. And Adria Forte.
How much longer did you have on Mr. Pauser's direct? Cross.
The witness has a time crunch problem with work.
Okay. Any issue with this out of turn?
No, but my other witness has a time crunch problem as well. So I don't have a problem doing, is it Adria Forte? Is that who it was?
Correct.
I don't have a problem with doing her right now. If we can do her, if we can do my extra witness right afterwards really quickly.
Okay, no problem. This is much easier than doing it at an airport, so this is better. All right. Ms. Hall, please call your next witness.
Adria Forte.
Good afternoon, Ms. Forte.
Hello.
You've been called as a witness in this trial. I'm going to have the clerk swear you in, and then the attorneys will be asking you a few questions. Madam Clerk, can you please swear in Ms. Forte?
If you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name and date of birth for the record?
Adria Pratt Forte, date of birth is 12.
Sorry.
Date of birth is?
12/4/1980.
Okay. Please proceed, Ms. Hall.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Could you please state your profession?
I am a licensed mental health counselor
And where do you currently reside?
in Jacksonville, Florida.
And do you know Elizabeth Pauser?
Yes.
And do you know Scott Pauser?
Yes.
And how long have you known each one of them?
Approximately 5 years.
Can you tell me how you came to know Mr. and Mrs. Pauser?
I met Liz through a friend when our children were little, so play group. And then I met Scott through knowing Liz and their daughter Madison.
Okay. And are you married?
Yes.
And do you have children?
Yes.
And how many children do you have?
We have one little boy.
And is he close in age to Madison Pauser?
Yes.
All right. Have you stayed in contact with Ms. Pauser since she moved away from Jacksonville?
Yes, I have.
While everyone was living in Jacksonville, how often would you see Mr. and Mrs. Pauser?
I would see Liz and Madison on a very frequent basis. It could be weekly, sometimes multiple times a week. And then during the academic year, if schedules were busy, then it was more visits on weekends, or there might be a few weeks in between our time together. And then I would see Scott Pauser during some of the family events, but it wasn't as frequent.
Now you mentioned family events. What do you mean by family events?
So there's a group of 3 families, each with 1 child. And so the 3 children were very close. Each family had, a married couple, and we would get together and celebrate. One family would host like an Easter get together where it would be an art activity or a craft, and then, like food or a barbecue, 4th of July, Christmas, birthdays. So kind of the major holidays, because our children are all only children. It was a way to engage and have them socialize together.
And did Scott Hauser attend these, what you call family events?
He attended some of them, but not all of them.
Was he invited to all of them?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity over the 5 years to observe Elizabeth with Madison?
Yes.
And what type of relationship did you observe between the 2, Elizabeth and Madison?
I observed just a very loving relationship. Liz has a way of putting Madison's needs first, and a great example of that would be just the way that she would bring in science activities and like arts and crafts and really fun, engaging activities. The focus during these times that we were together, these play dates, the focus was always the well-being and the education and the nurturing of Madison, of the children, and Liz brought that love and acceptance and nurturing to our son as well. On every occasion. So beyond basic needs being met, I think that she always just puts Madison first and helps guide her and wants her to socially and emotionally and academically kind of have all of her needs met. Anything that Liz is able to give her, she'd like to give her.
Did you have the same type of opportunity to observe Mr. Pauser with Madison?
Not as frequently. On some occasion at their home, if we would be there, or there was 1 or 2 get-togethers that 1 or 2, maybe 3 over the 5 years that he was at our house, that he came to our house, and 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the other family's home as well. So I did have some time with him, just not as much as I had with Liz and Madison.
And when you observed him, did he interact with Madison?
He did interact with her. I can think of, visual. So I'm kind of visualizing a birthday party at their community pool. And I can think about, watching him kind of want to make sure that Madison had her cake or make sure that she had her toy. But I also noticed it on a very different level. It wasn't as frequent. Because it wasn't as frequent, the times that I got to see them together, there's often times where it was Liz's responsibility, honestly, to care and take care of the party and make sure that all the children's needs were met. And because of that, I often observed Scott more socializing with the adults and not as engaged with Madison. And so the only times I can honestly say under oath that I saw him really attending to Madison's needs is when Madison came up and asked him to.
Okay, did he interact with the other children?
He made eye contact with them, but I can honestly say that I never saw him engage or play with our son or the other little girl that was present at those events.
Did Mr. Pauser ever initiate any type of activity or play date?
No.
Have you visited Mr. and Mrs. Pauser in their home in Jacksonville?
Yes, when they lived here, I did.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to visit them here in Naples at any time?
My husband and I came down to Naples in February around Valentine's Day, and we stayed overnight at Liz's residence with Liz and Madison, but we did not have an opportunity, or we didn't see Scott during that time that we were there.
Okay. Were there some challenges related to COVID?
Were there challenges related
to COVID and your family events?
Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Okay. Did your did the three families create a plan for COVID?
Yes. Okay. So our little boy, it's very important for him. He has some developmental delays and he has high functioning autism. He's very verbal, he's very bright, but social engagement is detrimental to his progress. And when COVID happened, and all of the children were kind of remote learning, he started to regress. And so Liz very quickly, through our conversations via text, recognized that she was home on her own with Madison, and I was home homeschooling on my own with Liam. And when they resided in Jacksonville, we lived a mile and a half, 2 miles away from each other. And so we made a commitment that we would both have our groceries delivered via Instacart, and then we would socially distance and not go out and do other things and just have the children play together. And we did that a few times a week outdoors, where they had water play, and we have a trampoline in a large yard. And we were able, I can honestly say that saved our son's progress. He bounced right back, and I could see both of them socially, Madison and our son Liam, absolutely thrive during that time. When in my profession, I watched other children have a very difficult time and regress because of the social distancing and isolation that COVID produced.
Have you observed any problems with Madison that has caused you to give any advice to Liz?
I'm going to object at this point. Ms. Forte was not tendered as an expert. I get the fact that she apparently is a licensed mental health counselor, but if we're getting to the point now with opinions or observations that would be normally in the province of an expert, it's inappropriate.
I'm not sure if that's what the question was designed to elicit, but I do agree with you, Mr. Lombardo. If she's speaking in terms of her profession, then I would sustain that objection, but it's not clear to me that that's what's happening yet. So I'm going to overrule the objection for now.
Did you understand the question? I'm not asking you as a professional or a therapist. I'm asking you, did you observe anything with Madison that you raised as a concern to Elizabeth?
As a mom and a friend, I can answer that question as a mom and a friend. There were times during my own motherhood of my son that had some developmental delays that I engaged in a behavior chart at home, and there were times where Madison had a difficult time. Even in the play with our son, there was times where she had a difficult time speaking up. She would get very shy and timid. She had a hard time speaking up, or she would have a hard time maybe like following a direction, having a little bit of like a meltdown. And so during those times as a mom, I would say, hey, I do this at home with my child. Would you like, the same kind of outline or chart? Do you want to see what I do with Liam? Would that help? And I know that during those times when Liz was able, she jumped right on board and did do some of those things, especially in that COVID period. And we watched Madison would sometimes not want to always like eat healthy food or eat her meals. And so Liz was concerned because her weight she wasn't growing, like she was in a very low percentile. And so as her friend and as somebody who loves Madison, we kind of I helped her just create I told her like how to create like a token system. And Madison during that time started really like eating her food and listening, and she started growing. She was happy. There was times where she would come up and talk to me, and it took a few years before she would initiate conversation with me, just like at home, in our home, when she was super comfortable. And during that period of time, she really flourished. And you could see how happy she was.
All right, and it was Liz opening to talk to you and the other family about children's issues?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's what all three of us would do together. The three friends, we would just share, like any other moms do, share what we're doing, share our feelings, ask for help, support each other.
Right. Thank you. I have no further questions, but Mr. Lombardo probably does.
Mr. Lombardo, do you have cross-examination? You're on mute. Oh, sorry.
Nothing, Your Honor. We have no
Okay.
cross.
Thank you very much, Ms. Forte, for your time. Okay. I'm going to send you out of the Zoom room.
Okay.
All right. Now I guess, are we hearing Mr. Lombardo's witness out of turn?
Well, we asked her to come back. She was here earlier. We asked her to come back, so we're waiting for her. Can we just continue with
We
this?
have Paige Ormond is in the waiting room right now. Is that who you're talking about?
That would be my other short witness, Your Honor, and I'd
That's
like
fine.
to take her while we're waiting.
Okay.
What's her name again? I'm sorry.
Paige Ormond.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Hall, please call your next witness.
Paige Ormond, please, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ormond. Can you hear us? Good afternoon, Ms. Ormond. Can you hear us? You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Are you speaking to me? I
Yes.
couldn't hear for a second there.
All right. Welcome, Ms. Ormond. Good afternoon. You've been called as a witness. So what we're going to do is have the clerk swear you in, and then the attorneys will take turns asking you questions. Madam
Thank you.
Clerk, can you please swear in Ms. Ormond?
If you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Can you please state your name and date of birth for the record?
Paige Ormond, March 2nd, 1975.
Okay. Please proceed, Ms. Hall.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Ormond. Could you please state what your residence location is?
I live in Arvada, Colorado.
Right? And what is your profession?
I'm an attorney.
Do you know Elizabeth Pauser?
Yes.
And how long have you known her?
I've known Liz since we were 7, second grade.
Okay. And do you know Scott Pauser?
Yes.
And how long have you known him?
I met Scott in 2013. I want to say October or maybe early November of 2013.
Have you remained close to Mr. and Mrs. Pauser throughout their marriage?
I've remained close to Liz throughout their marriage.
Have you had contact with Mr. Pauser throughout the marriage?
I have had some contact with Mr. Pauser.
Have you stayed in their home in Naples, for example?
Yes.
Have you stayed in the Jacksonville rental they had?
Yes.
Have you stayed in the Jacksonville home that they lived in?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall the time period when Mr. and Mrs. Pauser were purchasing a house in Jacksonville?
I do recall that time period. Yes.
Do you recall when that was approximately?
I think it was late 2014, December maybe, when they purchased that house, or went under contract at least.
Now, why do you specifically recall another couple buying a house?
So my partner and I were buying a house at around that we had started looking. We didn't end up buying until a little bit later, but we started looking for a house around that same time. And so Liz and I had discussions about, you know, some of the difficulties of finding a house, and we both had about the same price range when they first started looking. And so I recall having some of those discussions with her because we were both going through it at the same time.
Were your price points about the same for the purchase of a house?
Yeah, my recollection is that hers was maybe slightly higher than ours, but that, yes, we were around the same price range. And so some of our discussions were about, you know, how frustrating it was to find a house in that price range.
And can you tell me what that price range was?
Our price range was up to about 400,000. And I recall Liz's maybe being slightly higher than that, or maybe it was right around there.
Okay, and did there come a time when you learned that Mr. and Mrs. Palzer had gone under contract for a house?
Yes.
And how did you know that?
Liz sent me either an email or a text message saying we went under contract, and she sent me a link to the listing of the house that they went under contract for.
Okay, and was there anything about that house that stands out in your memory?
I mean, I remember being surprised and thinking there's no way they got that within, you know, the price range that we had talked about being in. And I mean, I remember thinking this is a very nice house.
And did you have any discussions with Elizabeth Palzer with regard to the price of the house?
Yes. So I spoke to her on the phone and we talked about how nice the house was. And I remember asking her, did you find that within your price range? Because I was surprised. It was a pretty big house. And she said no, that they had paid a lot more than within that price range.
And did you come to learn how they could afford to pay more than the original plan?
Yeah, she told me that her father had loaned them money toward the down payment.
And did she tell you how much was loaned?
My recollection was that she did, and that amount was $250,000.
All right. In addition to visiting Mr. and Mrs. Palzer in their homes, did you also take any trips together?
We did a joint vacation a few years ago when my son was almost 2 and her daughter was almost 4.
Okay. And during your contact, either in their homes or on this trip, did you have the opportunity to observe Elizabeth Palzer with her daughter Madison?
Yes. Yes.
And what type of observations did you make?
So there were a few times that they came over to the rental. We had rented a property on a lake, and there were a few times that Liz and Madison came over and we all went like paddleboarding and kayaking, and Liz was very attentive to Madison, very hands-on, engaging her in all the activities. I don't think Madison could swim at the time, and Liz was, you know, making sure that Madison could still have fun around the water in a safe manner. And we had a great time. My son loved seeing Liz and her daughter, and it was a good time.
Okay. Did you have the opportunity to observe Mr. Palzer with his daughter Madison?
Very minimally, but yes.
And what did you observe when you had the opportunity?
I remember that they were fishing together. And that was one of the times that I saw him with Madison. I didn't see them together much. It was a weird dynamic, that vacation, because Liz's parents were also there, and there was a lot of tension between Scott and Liz's parents.
Okay. Were there opportunities when you were with Mr. and Mrs. Palzer and Madison, but Mr. Palzer wasn't present?
Yes.
And why would that be?
I don't exactly remember. I think he might have been working, but I don't know, because when I would visit Liz, I didn't see much of Scott. And so that wasn't unusual to me that he wouldn't be there. Even though I was staying in their house, I rarely saw Scott when I went to visit them.
Where would he be?
In the bedroom.
Okay.
Or at work.
Okay. We have just a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
I have nothing further of Ms. Orman, but Mr. Lombardo may. Please stay on.
Mr. Lombardo, do you have any cross?
Give me 1 second, Your Honor. Ms. Norman, how many times did you go to Jacksonville to visit them?
Jacksonville specifically, twice.
Over a 6-year period of time?
Yes.
And have you lived in Colorado? How long have you been in Colorado?
Since 2013.
Prior to moving to Colorado, where were you residing?
Chicago.
When was the last time that you and Ms. Pauser resided in the same town?
When we graduated from high school.
Give me one moment, Your Honor. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Orman, thank you very much for your time here today. You may exit the Zoom room.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if we can call Karen Copland and take care of that real quickly, that would be appreciated.
I don't have her in the Zoom room. Is this
She's
in
here
person? That's really weird.
I know.
Right.
I'm doing things very strangely.
Yeah.
We're actually having human-to-human contact.
All right.
Microphone.
Gonna ask the questions.
Are you ready, Your Honor?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Ms. Copeland, can you please state your full name for the record?
Hold on one second. Madam Clerk, can you please swear in the witness?
If you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
What is your name?
Karen Coney Copland,
Can you spell the last name?
C-O-N-E-Y, like the island, C-O-P-L-I-N.
C-O-P-L-I-N. And when's your date of birth?
9/28/65.
Okay. I can't help but notice that there was some sort of paper in front of you. I'm going to ask you at this time to put that aside. All right. Please proceed, Mr. Mundy.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Copeland, where do you presently reside?
1260 Forest Ave, Naples, Florida, 34102.
And how long have you resided at that address?
Since November 2015.
And when did you first move to Naples, Florida?
In April 1994.
So is it correct that you've been in Naples for approximately 27 years?
Yes.
Could you please provide us with a brief description of your educational background, including your highest level of education?
Yes, I graduated from the State University of New York College at Oswego in 1987 with dual degrees in political science and American studies. From there, I went directly to Cornell Law School, where I graduated in 1990.
And what is your present occupation?
I'm a realtor with Downing Fry Realty.
And what certifications or licenses do you presently have?
I'm licensed by the state of Florida to sell real estate as a sales associate, and I also am a member of the Florida Bar.
And when did you first obtain your real estate license?
In the year 2000.
So you've had your license for approximately 21 years?
Yes.
And who are you presently employed by?
Downing Fry Realty.
And who were you employed by before Downing Fry?
From 2000, when I got my license, to 2010, when I departed for Downing Fry, I was with Premier Sotheby's International Realty in Naples.
Do you specialize in residential real estate or commercial?
Residential.
And have you always specialized in residential?
Yes.
Now, being a realtor for as long as you have, are you familiar with the rental market in the city of Naples?
Yes, I am, and outside the city as well.
And have you assisted any clients with obtaining rentals in Southwest Florida?
I have.
Approximately how many rentals do you assist clients with on a yearly basis?
I would say directly, I probably assist 2, and indirectly, I probably assist a dozen or more.
And since the pandemic has came upon us, have you seen a difference in the real estate market in Southwest Florida?
Yes, the inventory is at an all-time low in almost every neighborhood, both from a sales perspective as well as from a rental availability perspective.
And has this pandemic increased or decreased the valuations of properties in Naples, Florida?
It's dramatically increased the valuations.
Now, are you familiar with a subdivision in Naples called Old Cypress?
Yes.
Have you assisted any clients with any purchases, rentals, or anything of that nature
Yes,
in
I
Old
have.
Cypress? And how many occasions?
I was interviewed to lease a property for clients that were getting divorced, and I ended up selling that property. And that was my only listing there, but I have taken buyers through there dozens of times.
Okay, now are you aware that the wife in this matter, Elizabeth Pauser, presently resides in Old Cypress?
Yes.
And do you recall what her address is?
Probably I do. I want to say 7501 Lantana Circle.
And have you seen pictures of wife's residence?
Yes, I have.
And where did you obtain these pictures?
From the MLS sales listing.
Do you recall how many bedrooms this residence has?
4 bedrooms.
Do you recall how many bathrooms?
I want to say 4 baths.
And do you recall the approximate square footage?
It was just under 3,000 square feet.
And does this residence have a pool?
Yes, it does.
Now, do you customarily run comparables when representing other clients to determine the fair market value of a rental?
Always.
And did you conduct any comparable research pertaining to Mrs. Pauser's residence in Old Cypress?
Yes, I looked at the most recently rented properties in that particular subdivision, in Old Cypress as a whole, and then also in the geographic territory, which MLS creates for comparables because they are all close at hand.
And did you come across any residences that were rented on Miss Pauser's street?
Yes, there were 2 or 3 as I recall.
Now, do you remember the approximate size of those homes, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and whether they're comparable to Miss Pauser's?
I believe 2 of them were considerably smaller, at least 1,000 square feet. None of them had 4 bedrooms. And what I'm not remembering precisely is whether there was one that was about the same size, but with 1 less bedroom.
Okay. And do you remember what the rental values of those properties went for?
$4,500 for the smallest property, as I recall. And I believe the upper limit might have been $7,500.
In the current state of this market, do you believe $4,500 per month is the fair market value of a home similar to Miss Pauser's?
No, that would be a below market valuation. I think a fair market valuation would be considerably higher than that, given the lack of inventory and the size and features of the home.
And you being a realtor, if you were to come across this property and rent this property, what would you put on it for a monthly rent obligation for a prospective renter?
I would think a fair market valuation for a monthly rental would be at least $6,500 a month.
And are you aware that the wife is presently paying $3,000 a month in rent?
I was not aware of the precise figure, but I understood it may be something under fair market valuation.
So you would say the $3,000 per month is under fair market value?
Yes, very much so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Hall?
Yes, Ms. Coney Copeland, are you a client of Woodward, Pierce and Lombardo?
I am.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance?
Overruled.
Ms. Coney Copeland, and am I saying that correctly? I'm sorry. Do you use the hyphenated name?
It's not hyphenated. You can just use Coney. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Coney, you don't know Ms. Pauser at all, correct?
I do not.
All right. And do you have circumstances where you've seen clients who reside in homes owned by their family members?
I have.
And have you seen them paying rent less than market value?
Actually, because a lot of people set up, I want to say Cupert trusts, Cuperts, they generally pay fair market rental value.
Wasn't it true that more often than not, they just pay enough to cover the expenses?
I don't know if I can answer that fairly. I don't know if it's more often than not. I would say it's not more often.
Okay. All right. How many individuals do you know that are renting properties from family members?
At the moment, 3.
Okay. Where are those properties?
2 are along Gulf Shore Boulevard and 1 is in Port Royal.
Okay. The Gulf Shore properties, what are the value of those 2 properties?
The value of the rental or the value of the property?
Sorry, the rental value. I apologize. I wasn't clear.
I believe 1 is about $7,500 a month for a 2-bedroom property. And I'm not clear if the other one is something north of $13,000 a month.
Okay, and the 3rd property?
Is in Port Royal, and that was $15,000 a month.
$15,000 a month. Okay, I have nothing further, Ms. Coney. Thank you for your time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, with all that, are we ready to go back to the cross-examination of Mr. Pauser?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Give me 1 second, where were we? When we left off, we were talking furniture.
Your Honor, can we just take a very brief break?
Sure. It's 2:20. Let's just do 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right, let me know when you're all ready to go back on the record.
We're ready.
We're ready, Your Honor.
All right, please proceed, Ms. Hall.
Thank you. Mr. Pauser, I want to move off furniture and go to the sale of the Jacksonville house. Am I correct that prior to the closing, you went to Wells Fargo and obtained forms to open up a new account?
Correct.
You have a nephew who works there, correct, and who got the forms for you?
Correct.
And am I also correct that Ms. Pauser had come down to visit you in Naples and you gave her those documents to sign in a parking lot?
That's right. As Liz was leaving town, I brought the forms over to her on her way out of town. So we just met in the parking lot for her to sign off on those.
Okay, and that was an account at Wells Fargo that require both parties to approve all transactions, correct?
Yes.
And that was quite a bit before the closing date, correct?
I don't remember the exact date, but it left plenty of time for us to get it opened and then have the account.
Okay, and the proceeds did not end up going into that account, correct?
Correct.
And Ms. Pauser at no time was given any checks or anything related to that account, right?
No checks, no credit cards or anything off of that account.
Okay. And at closing, you insisted that the proceeds be split 50-50 right at closing, right?
No.
Okay, well, whose idea was that?
The way it worked was I had indicated to Liz that I was not comfortable closing and having the funds put in our joint checking account for fear that the money, because of what had happened and the goings on earlier with our conversations, I did not want to put it in the joint checking account. So that's why that joint account at Wells Fargo was opened. Liz had indicated she didn't want to put the money in the joint Wells Fargo account. I said, okay, fine. Then the next option in my mind is to have it put into an escrow account and we can work this out to see, how the funds will eventually be distributed. That was declined by Liz. And I said, well, then, we can have separate checks cut in half, one for you and one for me. And she said, that's what I would rather do.
Would it be fair to say that since you closed on that house, your in-laws have been cleared, they believe they're owed money?
I'm sorry, Ms. Hall, I couldn't quite hear you on that one.
So would it be fair to say, Mr. Pauser, since you closed on the sale of that house, your in-laws have indicated to you they believe they're owed money?
No.
Okay, how soon did that start?
I received a letter from from my in-laws. I think it's in the exhibit that is in evidence with the correspondence from my in-laws. And so I received a letter from them indicating that there was some sort of home loan.
Well, am I correct that before that, your wife was taking the position, this money needs to be repaid to my parents?
No, before that, my wife was taking the position that the money needed to be taken from the sale of the Jacksonville house and then added to the money from the sale of the New York house in her trust, and then on a 1031 exchange, purchase a house in Naples in the trust name and include in that purchase the funds that came out of the sale of the Jacksonville house.
Well, all the money in this trust that you've referred to belongs to her parents, correct?
I don't know. I don't have a copy of the trust. Unfortunately, it wasn't provided in discovery.
Well, you already said that it's a trust that was established by Dr. and Mrs. Kirshner, correct?
I don't know who established it. The only thing I know is there's a trust and it's titled in my wife's name. I think that the title of it has her parents as trustees. I do not know who funded it. I don't know how it was started, and I don't know the provisions because I haven't been provided one despite my request.
Well, you had the opportunity to subpoena it from the trustees, correct?
No, actually, in fact, I did try to take the deposition in this case of one of the trustees, and according to the process server, he was ducking service and
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor.
You asked the question, overruled.
Your Honor, I did not invite him to say what a process server said. I asked if he could have subpoenaed the document from the individual.
The objection's overruled.
Go ahead and answer.
Okay, so I made attempts to get Mr. Kirshner under subpoena so I could take his deposition to find out what the facts are with respect to the terms of this trust. There's some claim loan. I wanted to find out what's the basis of this, because I have never seen a note. I've never seen a mortgage. I've never seen anything in writing about a loan. And so, that was, and he was put on a witness list by my wife in this case. At one point in time, it may have been removed, but nonetheless, I did.
Move to strike. This is so far beyond the question.
Overruled.
Mr. Pauser, my question to you was very simple. Did you subpoena a copy of that trust document from anyone other than your wife?
I did. I attempted to subpoena the copy of the trust from the property appraiser.
Why do you think the property appraiser would have a copy of the trust?
I know it's very odd because my wife had contacted me and said that she'd homesteaded this property and she needed me to sign off on a document. And I found that strange because I had a lease for the property. And I think a lot of us, especially lawyers, know that it's illegal to get homestead on a property that's a rental property. In the state of Florida, people are criminally prosecuted for that. So I found it odd. So I wanted to find out what was going on. I did send a request to produce in this case for it and received for any documents that my wife was referencing, and I didn't receive them, but I did subpoena the documents from the property appraiser, but they have objected, subject to needing a court order for those.
Mr. Pauser, you have been sued by your mother-in-law, correct?
Yes.
And that complaint contains all of the allegations against you, correct?
It's got allegations against me. I don't know if that's all of her allegations, but.
Okay. And your mother-in-law also sued your wife, correct?
That's right.
All right. And you have been provided with a copy of this homestead exemption receipt that you just referenced, correct?
There was some sort of homestead exemption receipt. That's correct.
Well, and you also researched the fact that a trust can get a homestead, correct?
A trust can get a homestead if if the individual, I believe an individual still has to apply, and as I understand it, and this is not something that I have a full legal understanding of per se, but as I understand it, if there is a sufficient basis for the property appraiser to determine that the person residing at the residence has a sufficient ownership interest in that property per the trust documents. So they're going to read the trust documents and say, okay, does Liz Kirshner have a sufficient ownership interest in this property to grant her a homestead here on this property, even though it's in trust name? That's my understanding of how it works.
Well, my question was pretty simple. A trust can obtain a homestead on a property, correct?
Yes.
And the trust in this particular case has the homestead exemption on the property where your wife resides, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now in your exhibits, exhibit number 22, which you don't have to turn to it, I'll just, I'm sorry, I'm giving you the wrong number. I want to give you the right number here. You put into evidence what you believe to be pictures of your wife's current residence, which is exhibit 22. Do you remember putting those into evidence on your direct?
Yes.
And Mr. Lombardo had you scan through the pictures there?
Yes.
And you testified those are accurate pictures of your wife's residence?
I did say, to the best of my knowledge, because I can tell you that from the outside it looks like my wife's residence. I have never stepped foot inside my wife's home.
Well, that's my point. When you testified that those were, for your personal knowledge, copies or pictures of your wife's current residence, you don't know that, correct?
No, I don't know. Like I said, the photographs from the outside do to me to appear to be the resident. And so they do look like the residents to me. If we are mistaken on that, I'm sure Liz can clear that up on her testimony.
Thank you for that. Now, one of the issues you raised is the 2020 tax filing by your wife. Sir, at any time, did you contact your wife and ask her to either join in a joint tax return or ask her what she was doing about her tax return for 2020?
No, I didn't.
And in fact, you never told her you were filing a tax return either, correct?
Well, I think it's pretty safe to assume that I was going to file a tax return.
Okay. And would you agree with me that your relationship has deteriorated to the point that you and your wife do not speak on the phone, but rather rely on texts and emails?
Unfortunately, that's true.
Now, in this litigation, am I correct that you filed a motion to compel, correct?
We did file a motion to compel.
Okay,
Can I ask for clarification? What litigation are we talking about?
This litigation.
All right. Well, I didn't know whether we were still on the lawsuit that her mother filed.
Well, I left that before the tax return discussion, but I'm talking about this particular case, Mr. Pauser. You filed a motion to compel, right?
I believe there was a motion to compel some tax returns.
And the motion to compel is for your joint tax returns for 2013 through 2016, correct?
That's right.
And has your wife repeatedly told you she doesn't have those tax returns?
No, that's not initially what she said.
Well, sir, has she sent that to you in writing, in emails?
But prior to sending the emails in writing, she had just said, well, I'll get them to you. And I know when we were still speaking on the phone, the issue had come up and I had said, hey, I need the tax returns.
And your wife gave you the 2017, 18, and 19 tax returns, correct?
Right. Initially, I asked her for those years. And then I came back to her and I said, I want to get the rest of the tax returns They were kept in the same exact place together. The 2017, 2018, 2019 were kept in the same file boxes as the others. And I said, please get them to me. I did a request. Then she said, you have to request it through my attorney. I made that request. And then the response to the request was, you already have them. The response to the request to produce was not, we don't have them.
Well, sir, isn't it true that the actual text message or email message says, I will look for them initially, and then it's, I don't have them?
There was, well, I will tell you this, that the initial conversation was, I'll get them for you. And then it was, at one time she says, I'll bring them to mediation. And then they didn't arrive at mediation. And then eventually it came down to, I looked and I don't have them. But that was not initially the response. And I might add that it was not the response in the official response to our request to produce. It wasn't said, we've looked for them and we don't have them. That's not what was said.
No, the initial response was 3 tax returns produced, and the other response was the husband has the other tax returns, correct?
I'd have to look at the response I don't know if we have the motion here, but I'd actually like to see it.
Okay, you also propounded interrogatories.
We did.
There was standard mandatory disclosure, correct?
Yes.
And then you did 2 more requests for production from your wife.
We did.
And then you requested her deposition but didn't take it.
We did request her deposition and we decided not to take it. And I think we were just out of time.
Okay, and then you requested taking her father's deposition, but you've already testified you didn't get him served, correct?
We made multiple attempts to get him served, and unfortunately, there was no cooperation there.
Okay. All right. Now, am I correct that your wife sends you emails and keeps you up to date on things like Madison's health?
She will send me emails and text messages keeping me up to date on what's going on with Madison.
And she sends you emails keeping you up to date on educational issues, like who the teacher was that day or what the assignments were?
On occasion.
And she, let me ask you this, has Madison had any weight issues?
Madison has always been small for her size. And I say she eats like a baby bird. And, you know, so it's always something I'm trying to get food in the kid. And I know Liz is too. And so, you know, that's the struggle, if you will. I know I looked at Madison's chart from her most recent visit to the pediatrician, and, you know, it looks like Madison was right about at 39 pounds. You know, it was noted she's light, but, you know, there wasn't a concern by the pediatrician that required any intervention at that time, at least according to the pediatrician's chart notes here in Naples from February of this year.
Your child is in the 7 to 9 percentile for weight, correct?
Yeah, I would guess that that's correct. I can't tell you for sure, but I know she's always been small for her age.
Okay, so do you take issue when you're, well, let me ask this. Your wife was primarily responsible for all of Madison's meals up until the time you were physically separated here in Naples, correct?
No.
Well, you testified earlier you would occasionally grill.
Well,
Occasionally grilling, isn't it true that Ms. Pauser was primarily responsible for Madison's meals while you were in an intact family?
I would say that she was primarily responsible, but I frequently feed Madison or give her a meal. So it's.
And so you take issue now when your wife sends you an email giving you a list of all the things that Madison likes to eat. You think that's micromanagement?
Well, you know, I think that under the circumstances, and that's just one email in many, you know, where it's don't feed her this, feed her that. you know, and so I would say that, and I told you in my testimony earlier, I said, look, I don't necessarily have a problem with her sending me an email saying, hey, these are the foods that Madison likes. I don't have a problem with that. So I don't take issue with that.
And the emails you specifically talked about with the list of food, isn't one of the problems that it turned out you and your wife were feeding her the same meals back to back, and therefore Madison was not eating some of them, and the goal was to change it up?
You know, I don't know if that was the goal. And I don't know if that was the issue that was raised when it was asked about doing some kind of chart with her meals.
Would it be fair to say that from the beginning of this case, your wife has taken the position that she does not think the current schedule is in the best interest of Madison?
I don't know if she did that right away. So I think that we started doing this, and then I think once we got further into this litigation, I think that things became more contentious.
Well, isn't it true that almost at the onset of the case, your former wife filed a motion for parenting evaluation?
Well, she did early on file a motion for a parenting evaluation, yes.
All right, and would it be fair to say that when you send your wife an email or a text message, she answers you?
Usually, yes.
Yeah, so your email selection here for exhibit number 15 starts off with an email from you August 24th, 2020, and then doesn't have any communication in response from your wife. She responded to you, didn't she?
In writing?
Yes, by text. Sorry,
I don't.
Where are you, Ms. Hall?
exhibit number 15, Your Honor.
Which one? Which page number?
Very first page.
Okay.
It's
15, you're against 16.
15-1.
Yeah, well, I think she's, yeah, it's the first, right.
So correct.
I have,
There's no replies there, correct?
yeah, that's right. I didn't get a reply to this email.
Okay, has a constant, I'll call it complaint or issue raised by your wife to third-party babysitters?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Am I correct that it has been a constant complaint or issue raised by your wife to third-party babysitters?
Yes, she has objected to the use of any third-party babysitters, including family members.
Okay, and the reason she's objected is because she has been available, correct?
No.
Well, in every instance, hasn't she offered to care for your child rather than have a third party pick her up from school or a babysitter on your parenting time?
The problem with her offer was that the offer was that if Liz went and picked up Madison at school, that Madison was going to spend the night with Liz if Liz did that. That was the offer. There was no offer, just so we're clear, there was never an offer to me by Liz that she would pick Madison up and then I would pick Madison up at her house when I left work. That scenario, I'd like to finish the question. That scenario that you're speaking of didn't happen. It was always in the context of if she picks up Madison and takes her to her house, then I'm not going to see Madison that night. And
nowhere in exhibit 15 does your wife say that I'm going to pick up the child and keep her. You can't have her back, correct?
Well, that's right. It may not say that, but we had telephone conversations earlier on when we were still speaking, where I brought up that idea of, look, that's fine. I'll pick her up at your house. I would have been fine with that. I'm fine with. I would have had no problem with that. Why on earth would I?
Sir, you believe that it's good socialization for Madison to spend time with either Julie Coleman or Robin Schiller as opposed to her mother?
Yes, I think that it is beneficial, especially for an only child, to have interactions with family members and other close friends of family, kids of different ages. I think it's beneficial for an only child. Still do.
One of the problems here is I asked about 2 people and the answers keep going on and we're going to run out of time here. I'm trying not to cut off Mr. Pauser, but he's...
Keep on going, Ms. Hall.
Your wife has reported that your daughter has been wetting the bed, correct?
I think there was one instance, or 2. I've not had her wet the bed at my house.
Okay. Your wife has asked if she could take her to a play therapist, correct?
Yes.
And you've objected?
Yes.
Why have you objected?
Because when I have Madison, I don't see anything with Madison that makes me believe that she needs any sort of therapy, medication, or anything like that. She seems to be a happy and well-adjusted child. I have not had any bedwetting at my house. And so on that basis, I did not think that it was necessary. And then in light of the fact that we're in litigation where, there's litigation issues and there was a request for a parental evaluation, I guess I just questioned if there was maybe an ulterior motive.
Okay, well, your own witness, Robin Schiller, said that she notes problems with your daughter's behavior when she comes back from her mother's house. Did you hear her testimony today?
I heard her say that Madison is, shorter and some of her responses are less warm, but that's it. I didn't hear anything about bedwetting or.
Do you agree that if your daughter is having problems at her mother's home, even if you don't see it, that it would be appropriate for your wife to seek help for her, or for both you and your wife to seek help for her?
No, I looked at it. Well, can I ask you to clarify your question? You talking about this play therapy?
That's generally what type of therapy for children this age there is, play therapy. Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
this isn't back and forth question and answer time, except for Ms. Hall just asked the question. Mr. Pauser just answer it.
I think he asked me to clarify what I meant, Judge, and I apologize.
Okay.
That's the question. Therapy for your child, which I will say that generally at their age is play therapy.
Yes, I'm not agreeable at this point for Madison to do any sort of therapy, including play therapy. I haven't seen any reason that she needs it.
You entered into evidence at your exhibit number 18, pictures of yourself with Madison and family with Madison, and I'm going to call it just the mom's group because that's kind of what we called it. Do you remember those pictures?
Yeah.
Those pictures were all taken during COVID, right?
I'm not, I mean, I guess, are we still in COVID or I guess, can you clarify?
Well, the first few pictures are in November of 2020, Thanksgiving, correct?
Yes.
And the Halloween pictures would be in October of 2020, correct?
The Halloween pictures were.
The pumpkins at page 12.
Yeah, I think that might have been after Halloween, but.
Let's call it the fall of 2020 then.
Yeah, I think that was after Halloween, but but probably November of 2020.
Then you have pictures in here from December. And when was this, it looks like a birthday party.
That's right.
When was that party?
That was a lot more recent. I think that party was within the last probably probably the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And is it fair to say that one of the issues that Ms. Pauser has raised about taking Madison out to restaurants and different places, that you need to be conscious of COVID, social distancing and masks?
She did raise it at one time. It's just not a big concern to me.
But your wife thinks it should be a concern, correct?
Well, here's the thing. I disagree that Liz really thinks it's a concern.
Okay.
Because my daughter goes to school and she can wear a mask. It's optional, and Liz has never required her to wear a mask.
How do you know?
Excuse me?
How do you know that?
Because Liz and I talked about it before we sent her, and we talked about masking and how our child's not going to wear a mask at school.
Your wife has facilitated FaceTime and text messaging between you and your child, correct?
Yes.
You didn't put into evidence any pictures of yourself and Madison or any activities that predate the filing of this case, right?
Probably not. No, I don't see any that were predating.
Has Liz brought to your attention the fact that Madison needs a car seat or a weight appropriate booster seat?
She has said that she thinks Madison needs the full car seat.
Because she's under the weight requirements, right?
I don't know. I looked at the Florida statute. There's actually a Florida statute on child restraints, and I did look that up.
But you don't know the answer?
I do know the answer. The answer is the Florida statute does not require above the age of 5 child restraint. I've got the statute somewhere here.
She's underweight and requires a child safety seat, correct? It does not age dependent.
I have no knowledge of her. She does, well, Madison is always in a child safety restraint when I drive her, period. So that's, so I'm not challenging that she gets put into a child safety seat, because I have one in my car and that's what we use.
The issue was the car seat in your parents' car, correct?
There is a car booster seat that is allowable for children between, I want to say, 3 and 5 in the state of Florida under the statute.
I understand the age, but what is the weight?
The statute doesn't reference a weight.
I have nothing further, Mr. Pauser. Thank you.
Okay. All right, any redirect, Mr. Lombardo?
Briefly, let's go back to the prenup. Ms. Hall asked you about references to earnings. And what references to earnings and waiver of earnings did you see in the prenup?
I'm going to object to this question. I asked the question, Mr. Pauser answered the question, and now somehow on rebuttal, he's going to come up, redirect. He's now going to either add to it or give something else. I was very specific in my questions.
Overruled.
You may answer.
Thank you. Where we left off, I was asked the question about where in this prenuptial agreement are the terms that relate to waiver of income. And so I talked about paragraph 5. And so to finish that, it says that those assets that are brought in by the husband, it's paragraph 5, husband separate property, and so for those assets that are received during the marriage by me, according to this provision, paragraph 5, those are solely my possession, my property, free from any claim of the other at any time. And so I believe that covers that. And then in paragraph 6, wife's separate property, there's the exact same provision at the end. I won't go through it again, but the exact same provision. Number 7 is appreciation in separate property. So all appreciation earnings of separate property, either passive or directly, shall remain their separate property. If we go to 8, this is probably a really important one. It says that property acquired during the marriage and all property and assets owned or acquired by either of the parties in his or her individual name before or after the marriage contemplated by this agreement as entered into shall remain and will be his or her separate property except as set out in the agreement. It goes on to say that the parties recognize that during the marriage, assets, property, and funds may be acquired by them. Each party agrees that the manner in which anything of value is titled during the marriage shall control its ownership and distribution in the event of any dissolution of marriage or death. So I do think that paragraph 8 is a very clear waiver of any claim to income, which I would say are either assets that are owned or acquired, or even it goes on to describe assets, property, or funds that may be acquired. And so I think that language is so broad, and I understood it at the time that I signed this document.
Objection, Your Honor, this goes well beyond the scope of the question of where in the document is there a waiver of income?
Quite frankly, the court finds this whole line of questioning on either side irrelevant. What his view of this agreement is not important. The terms of the agreement matter. You asked questions to him, Ms. Hall, which is why I continued to let him answer this on redirect. But for both of you, it's really not relevant how he views the provisions. So I don't know if you want to continue or not.
No, we'll move on. We'll move on. With regard to the trust, did you issue a request to produce requesting a copy of the trust to your former wife or your wife?
Yes, we did.
Did you receive it that way?
Did I receive the trust? No.
Yeah. With regard to the emails, if you look at exhibit number 15 and you go to page 12, what did your wife tell you with regard to your request for or what did you make the request of her to with regard to the tax returns?
Okay, so that was on October 31st, 2020. I had emailed her and said I would like to get copies of our joint tax returns and supporting documents from 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. These are the years we filed jointly.
All right, now looking at page 10, and I know it's a little out of sequence because of the way these things are, what was Ms. Kirshner telling you about the tax returns at that point?
She says, I'm still waiting to hear back from my attorney if she needs me to copy anything else in reference to the tax returns.
And did she also say she would provide them, that she would drop them off when she went to get Madison at the top?
Yeah, she says that I was waiting to finish with them, and she says I have a few more boxes and I will drop them off when I go get Madison. So, but she didn't bring them.
With regard to this discussion about picking up Madison after school, where Ms. Call asked you about Ms. Kirshner asking you if she could just pick her up after school. Did she, in fact, in the emails tell you and she was going to keep her?
You know, I there may have been an email where she said that.
Take a look at Exhibit 15, page 26.
Yes.
And did she tell you then that she was going to pick up Madison every day after school, and that you can just see her at a public place?
Yeah, she did say that. That was on November 12th of 2020. She said that she's going to pick her up every day after school from that point on. Don't bother telling her that I'm going to be picking her up, and that if I want to see her during the week, she'll meet me at a public place.
With regard to the COVID questions, did your daughter ever get COVID?
No.
Give me 1 second, Your Honor. Hold on for a minute. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Lombardo, do you have any other witnesses or evidence?
No further witnesses, Your Honor.
All right, Mrs. Hall?
Mr. I call my client, Elizabeth Hauser.
Okay. Ms. Pauser, please raise your right hand and be sworn in by the clerk.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name and date of birth for the record?
Elizabeth Susan Pauser, June 22nd, 1975.
Okay, please proceed, Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you this up front because I always forget. Are you going to ask Judge Cohen to change your name in the final judgment?
Yes.
And what name would you like restored to you?
Back to my maiden name, Elizabeth Susan Kirshner.
Okay, could you please spell that? The reporter's there.
Elizabeth, Elizabeth, Susan, Susan, Kirshner, Kirschner.
Thank you. Are you currently pregnant?
No.
And I forgot to tell you I was going to ask you that question. Sorry.
No.
It always stuns people. Okay. Are you in agreement that your marriage is irretrievably broken at this time?
Yes.
And are you asking Judge Cohen at the end of all the testimony and evidence and after his review that he dissolve your marriage?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please tell me how old you are currently?
45 years old.
Okay. And are you in good health?
Yes.
All right. And when did you meet Mr. Pauser?
In 2013.
When did you start dating him?
Maybe about April 2013.
Okay. And were you working at that time?
I was a school teacher with Collier County Public Schools.
Okay. And was that a full-time position?
It was.
At that point in time, Mr. Pauser said he was working. Did he give an accurate history of his employment as far as you know?
He did.
Okay. All right. And do you recall what you were earning at that time?
Probably about $42,000.
Okay. Now, there came a time when your relationship became more serious, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you eventually get married?
Because I was pregnant, yes.
And what was the date of the marriage?
November 30th, 2013.
Where were you residing at the time?
The house that I owned in the Vineyards.
Okay.
Fountain Run.
We call it Fountain Run is how everyone's referred to it,
Yes.
correct? And was that titled in your name?
Yes,
Did Mr. Pauser start living with you in that home?
he did.
How did you finance the purchase of that home?
I believe I took out a small loan and then my parents helped loan some money also.
Okay. How long did you continue to live in Fountain Run?
I think I lived there for about 9 or 10 years,
All right. And how long after you were married to Mr. Pauser did you stay there?
maybe 9 months.
Where did you move to next?
Jacksonville, Florida.
And is it correct Mr. Pauser moved ahead of you?
Only a couple days.
Couple
Yes.
of days. And were you pregnant at the time?
I was 6 months pregnant when we moved, yes.
Why did you and Mr. Pauser move to Jacksonville?
So he felt his law firm here was going to close the Naples office and they were based out of Fort Lauderdale. So he was looking for new employment. Since I was pregnant, we decided that if we were to get married, I would be a stay-at-home mom. So I would let him choose the job that he wanted. So he went to college at Jacksonville University and had friends up in Jacksonville. I'd never been there. And so I agreed to let him attempt to be as successful as he could be and move to Jacksonville without ever being there before.
Okay. All right. Did you have any family or friends in Jacksonville at the time?
No, I knew no one in Jacksonville.
All right. Did you continue to work outside the home after moving to Jacksonville?
No, because I was 6 months pregnant. So we just went up there to get settled and wait for the birth of our daughter.
And when was Madison born?
July 19th, 2014.
At any time since Madison was born, have you gone back to work?
I did a little substituting here and there. And I also did a 4-month maternity leave at a private school so I could get an inside view of the schools in Jacksonville.
Okay. And have you been able to, for example, during the pendency of this case, to keep up your certification?
I did at the very end, yes.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to go to the time you were in Jacksonville.
Yes.
Where did you first reside?
We had a rental for maybe 13 months as soon as we moved up there.
And what did you do at the house in Naples when you were living in the rental?
I put it on the market and finalized the sale once we had gotten to Jacksonville.
Okay. And when did it sell? Do you recall?
June 2000 and must have been 14.
Okay. And did you receive proceeds from the sale of that house?
Yes.
And what happened to the proceeds of the sale of that house?
I paid back my parents for the loan that they had given me to purchase that residence.
Okay. Now, I want to show you, well, before I do that, did you and your husband decide to buy a house in Jacksonville?
We did.
And how did you arrive at that decision?
We didn't want to rent forever. We knew we wanted our own house, so we started looking at houses a little before I gave birth to Madison and then after her birth.
You were here for the testimony of Paige Ormond, is that correct?
Yes.
And is it true that you and she were friends since the age of 7?
Yes,
And were you both house hunting at the same time?
we were. Yes,
Did you share that financial information with your friend?
I did. Yes.
Did there come a time when you and Mr. Pauser located a house to buy?
We did. Yes.
And what was the address of that house?
3694 Burnt Pine Drive, Jacksonville, Florida.
And did you go forward with the purchase of that house?
Yes, we did.
And what was the purchase price?
I think it was 580 something, high fives.
Okay, and could you and Mr. Pauser afford to buy that house on your own?
Not on our own, no.
So how did you finance the purchase of that house?
Well, my parents had been up to visit us a few times in Jacksonville and didn't like the state we were living in our rental, and they wanted better for us and their grandchild. So we had discussed using some of the money I paid back from the Vineyards loan they would loan us some money to purchase a house in Jacksonville.
Okay, all right. Have you put together a summary of the transaction of the purchase of Fountain Run and then into the purchase of Jacksonville?
I did, yes.
Could you please turn to, you have a notebook there, wife's exhibit number 5.
Yes.
Okay. Is this a summary of what occurred?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like the starting point was basically March of 2005 when you purchased Fountain Run?
Yes.
Okay, and is this summary correct that you paid $442,000?
That's correct.
Okay, do you recall when you sold it in June of 2014 what the net proceeds were?
It sold for $400,000, so I think I walked away with 380. Is it in here? I know the house sold for $400,000, so close to that.
Okay, you have a notation here that the proceeds were $371,000. Is that correct?
Your Honor, these are clearly leading questions, and I have a problem with the timeline as well. We're going to read from a document. This is not a document. This is just her notes. I don't have a problem with the attachments, but the summary, which is not consistent with the notes, or excuse me, with the supporting documentation, I have an objection to, and I have an objection just reading from it.
They haven't been moved to be admitted yet, but as far as reading from it, yes, I agree. That's the objection sustained.
Okay, you put together this summary, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have the backup documentation?
I do, yes.
Okay, so let's turn to the backup, which starts at page 3. Do you recognize page 3 of Exhibit 5? Do you recognize this document?
Yes, it was the warranty deed for the Fountainhead Run house.
Okay, and then page 5?
The HUD report, yes.
Okay, and is this for the sale of your Fountainhead property?
Yes.
Okay, actually, this
Wait,
one.
no,
has-
this is
This-
this is Collier, or Duval County.
You know, someone's speaking. I don't know who it is.
I think that was me because I said that wasn't the sale.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I'm like, do we have somebody else on the background there?
No, that was me because I was looking at it and it said burnt property drive or burnt
So this
Pine
is the
Drive.
settlement agreement for Burnt Pine Drive, the purchase, correct?
Yes,
And does that refresh your recollection as to the contract price of that house?
once I can find it.
I'll stipulate that it's 582, 146.
82, yes, 146. Yep.
Okay, and then turning to page 10. This is a Chase bank account statement for whose bank account?
Mine, Elizabeth Hauser.
And what is the account number?
Ends in 9235
And where were you living when this account was established?
in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay, and what was the opening deposit to this account?
$371,260.32.
Okay, is that 280.64? 371,280.64
What are you looking at?
here. I'll leave it with yours. Is that the net proceeds from the Fountain Run sale?
Yes,
Okay, if you could turn to page 11. Is this the same bank account?
it is correct.
Okay, and now it's in the name of who?
Myself and my mother, Linda Kirshner,
And why is your mother's name now on this account?
because this is how I was repaying the loan back to my parents. Since we were already in Jacksonville, I opened the account, put the money in, but since I needed a fresh signature, I waited until I could come back down and see her personally to put her on the account.
Now, at this point in time in your marriage, were you and Mr. Pauser happily married?
Yes,
And you were about to purchase a significant asset, correct?
yes,
All right, and this account statement shows a withdrawal there of $185,580.93. What was that for?
What page are you on, Miss Hall? I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost.
Sorry, Judge, page 11.
11. Okay, thank you.
There's a wire transfer there, $185,580.93 on page 11.
mhm.
Where was that money going to?
Back to my parents. Wait,
Okay.
was it? Yes, back to my parents. Was that one? Hang on, let me look. Yes,
Wait, you're on page 11?
hang
I'm
on.
on exhibit 5.
Okay, so no, this was for
But this
the,
says it's going to Pine Road, or
Right,
Burnt Pine Drive,
this was for the purchase of the Jacksonville house.
Okay, so it wasn't going to your parents, it was going
No,
for
I'm
the
sorry,
down
I looked
payment.
at the dates wrong. Yep,
Okay, so you're wire transferring money to the closing for the house,
the
correct?
Jacksonville house, yes.
All right, and there's another transfer there to the checking account, 8181. Whose account was that?
That's Scott and ours personal account.
And why were you transferring $35,000 approximately at that time?
We transferred that money for the purchase of furniture and house upgrades, like pavers and a few other things we wanted to do to the house, but for furniture.
Okay, all right. Now, also in this exhibit, starting at page 15, there's some checks included. What is this check for? This, is that weekly?
Yeah, David Weekly Homes, that was the down payment for our house in Jacksonville.
Okay, and so there's a deposit into your joint account and then this withdrawal, correct?
Yes.
All right,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and then if you.
Oh, I'm sorry. 15, this was the initial deposit?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
David Weekly Homes. Okay. Then I'm going to ask you to turn to page 23, which is the joint account 8181.
Yes,
And do you see the transfer coming in
Yes,
of
for,
$30,000. That
Yep.
ties into the account with your name and your mother's, correct?
yes,
All right. And then if you turn to page 28, we've already looked at the check, but there's the actual statement showing the check being cashed, right?
yes,
Okay, so then did you pay other expenses related to the house,
yes, we did.
such as what?
Furniture, pavers, a fence. When I say furniture, I mean lighting, window treatments, everything for the inside of the house.
Okay, so if you turn to page 33,
Mhm.
there's a reference there to day and night movers. What was that for?
Moving from our rental to our house in Burnt Pine.
Okay. And then there's a reference on page 37 to Bank of England Mortgage Company. What is that for?
That must have been part of the closing of the house.
Okay, did you and Mr. Pauser have a mortgage on that house?
We did.
Okay, did you sign a note and mortgage to your parents?
Give me 1 second. April, please just let me know when the switch has to happen. Just raise your hand and I'll do the switch. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Please proceed.
No problem. Well, let's continue down this path. Page 50, you've got some expenses there out of the joint account again. Are they related to the house?
Yes,
And is this all coming out of the loan money?
it is.
Okay. Did you repay any money to your parents?
I did. Yes.
And how did you go about doing that?
It came out of that joint account from mine and my mother's from the Chase account.
Okay, and who did you transfer that money to?
My parents' account.
All right. Yeah. Did you and Mr. Pauser sign a note and mortgage to your parents?
We did not.
Why not? If you know.
Because we were family and they trusted us. I had borrowed money for my Naples house and returned it, and they felt they were helping us out and we would keep our word.
Okay. Was this loan discussed with Mr. Pauser in advance?
It was, and he said his only condition, he was happy to take it. His only condition is he wanted his house, his name on the house, which was absolutely fine with everybody because he was my husband and we thought this was going to be our forever house that we would live in forever. And if something else happened and we sold it, then we would return the money.
Okay. All right. And did there come a time when you and Mr. Pauser decided to sell this house?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, why were you selling the house?
I had wanted to return to Naples for quite a few years and we had been talking about it for years. And with him changing his job, it just turned out to be a good time right now.
Okay. And where was your family primarily living?
My parents live on Marco Island.
And what about Mr. Pauser's family?
His parents were currently in the Jacksonville area in Ponte Vedra.
Okay. Had they lived in Jacksonville the entire time you were there?
No, they were in South Carolina for a few years. They moved to Ocala for 2 years and then they moved closer to us.
Okay. And then did they follow you, so to speak, to Naples?
They did. They have a lot of family here. They have their 2 daughters here, grandchildren and great-grandchildren here.
Okay. Did Mr. Pauser find a job in Naples, as he said?
He did, yes, for Morgan & Morgan.
And do you recall when he left Jacksonville?
Probably April 2020.
And was the house for sale at that time?
It was.
And
We're
where-
close to it, yeah.
Okay, and where were you at that time?
I stayed in Jacksonville. I was doing virtual school with my daughter. I got the house ready to sell it, put it on the market. We were selling for sale by owner.
Why was Madison doing virtual school?
Because of the coronavirus, all the schools shut down, so she was home with me while I was trying to show the house.
Okay, all right. And did the house go under contract?
It did.
And at the time of sale, did you and Mr. Pauser already discussions about the proceeds of the sale?
We did, yes.
What type of discussions did you have?
I told him that my parents had wanted their money back. They would want the loan back like we talked about on the sale of the house. We He had said he was fine. Maybe if we could roll that money into another residence down here. So there were a lot of discussions. He started to say he didn't want to return that money back to my parents.
Okay. And did there come a time when the closing was right there?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Pauser want to do with the money?
So the night before the closing, he told me that he wasn't going to sign any of the closing paperwork because he was afraid I was going to give that money back to my parents if we put it in our joint account. So he gave me the option of either splitting it between 2 checks, which I kind of feel was blackmail. I told him if we didn't sign the closing paperwork that we could be sued, and him as a lawyer understands that we have a contract to close on this house. Or he wanted to put it in this account that he opened at Wells Fargo, which I was never given any information about. I didn't have an account number. I didn't know what type of account it was. I told him I wasn't going to do that. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. So I called my parents and said I was probably going to choose the 2 check option, and that I was kind of forced into one of those options.
Okay, and to your knowledge, did either one of your parents or both of them have contact with Mr. Pauser about this loan?
Not after the initial loaning of the money.
Okay, but when it came time for the sale of the Jacksonville house, did they communicate with him that they wanted to be repaid?
No, they communicated through me.
Okay, and did there come a time then when they started going directly to Mr. Pauser?
Yes, after the sale of the house and they expected to be paid back, then they started reaching out and contacting him.
Okay, all right. And have you repaid your parents your 1/2 of the sale proceeds?
I have, yes.
All right, and did you do it immediately, or how long did it take you to do that?
I did it in February. I wasn't sure what to do with the money. Scott and I had a period where I was staying at my parents'. Our relationship, we were having problems anyways, and we were talking about counseling. I guess I was hoping that he would return the money and we could still talk about it and talk about us. And then it just got to the point where we were going to end up divorced and there was no return. He told me I moved him to the most expensive city in Naples, and he needed to be financially secure and he wasn't going to return the money. So I think at that point our marriage was over. I knew my parents were going to have to sue both of us, and I guess I didn't know when to return the money, and I finally just returned it because I felt it was best to just be honest and give my parents back the money they loaned us.
Okay. When you moved back to Naples, did you take up residence with your parents?
I did for a month, yes.
And that was on Marco Island?
Yes.
Okay, and how long, you lived there for a month?
Yes.
And did you then move to another